Chapter 3077. In the end, he said that he was accompanying Yun Shirshir during her confinement period. But his soul was completely captivated by little Yueyao. He didn't know where he got his patience from, but from day to night, Yueyao kept calling Yueyao. Hurricane called him a few times to urge him to return to the base, but he ignored them all. He hugged Yueyao all day long, refusing to let go even when the little guy fell asleep. He even said to Muyaja, Look, Yueyao looks like me too. Her eyes will definitely look like mine when she grows up. Yeah. Muyaja felt really awkward when he heard this, but Gongjie was right. Yueyao's eyes were like his. Muyaja didn't know that Gongjie liked children so much that when Gongjie tried to snatch Yueyao away from him, Gongjie was quick to dodge. A certain man was instantly unhappy and said, My daughter isn't a toy. Why are you hugging her every day? Because I love Yueyao. Gongjie said. If you like her, why don't you just give birth to a daughter yourself? Muyaja snorted coldly. Yu added, That's right. The woman who wants to give birth to uncle's child will definitely be sent from here to Paris, France. Gongjie snorted and said, No matter who gives birth to her, she can't compare to my Yueyao. These words made Yu and Muyaja, this arrogant father and son pair, feel comfortable in their hearts and their ears. This rascal was really good at talking. Gongjie's words weren't coaxing. Initially, he wanted to spend more time with Shirshir when he came back, but he realized that this little niece of his was lovable no matter how he looked at her. He couldn't help but want to hug her and not let go no matter what. After 2 months, the child started to recognize people. Gongjie hugged her tightly, and little Yueyao recognized him. When she cried, Gongjie hugged her and coaxed her. As they laughed, she started to giggle. Her voice was very clear and melodious, like wind chimes. Speaking of little Yueyao, she was very picky. Other than Muyaja and Gongjie, she wouldn't be willing to be hugged by anyone else. Hua Jin didn't hug her much because Muyaja and Gongjie were there to block him. He didn't have any human rights. He was hoping that he would have a chance when Gongjie and Muyaja got tired of hugging her. In the end, these two energetic men didn't seem to get tired even if they hugged her with one arm for a whole day. Later on, when Hua Jin finally had the chance to hug her, little Yueyao couldn't get used to it and started to cry. At this time, Gongjie had an excuse to take the little one over and gently coax her. The clouds on her face disappeared and the sun could be seen. When she smiled, her eyes were red from crying. When she smiled, it was as if there were countless little stars hidden in her eyes. Even a cold-hearted person's heart would melt because of this smile. She especially loved to eat her fingers. No one knew what kind of delicious thing was on her fingers. When she smiled, she liked to put her little finger in her mouth. She would laugh until she drooled. Gongjie said that she must have been stunned by his beauty and was drooling. Yu would scold him for being shameless, but Gongjie would ignore him. He felt that Yu scolded him for being shameless out of pure jealousy. But this family of people, in terms of looks, were all top-notch. In terms of genes, the children of a family would definitely be dragons and phoenixes among men. This saying really came true. Chapter 3078. Yueyao, on the other hand, was crying hard. She waved her 2 chubby little paws and looked innocently in Gongjie's direction, as though she wanted him to carry her back. Gongjie couldn't bear to see this, but he also hoped that his sister would give Yueyao a good hug. However, Yueyao was crying so hard that his heart ached and his liver trembled. Hence he smiled and said, Sister, let me carry her. Yun Shirshir nodded. She didn't insist and handed Yueyao to her. After all, she still had a long way to go before she could spend more time with her daughter. There was no hurry. After a long time, she finally saw their faces clearly. Gongjie was still the same. Yu, Xiaoyi Chen, and Hua Jin were still there. She could finally see them again, but it felt like a lifetime had passed. Yu suddenly threw himself into Yun Shirshir's arms and hugged her tightly. Mommy, can you see Yu clearly now? Yun Shirshir hugged him and nodded. Yes. I can see clearly now, Xiaoyi Chen also ran in front of her as though he was a clown. He blinked and made a pitiful face. Mommy, what about me? Can you see me clearly too? Yun Shirshir pouted playfully. Yes. You've gained weight. You look like a little meatball. Looking up, she suddenly caught a glimpse of Hua Jin from the corner of her eye. He walked over slowly with a gratified expression and a faint smile on his face. She flipped over, got off the bed, and gently hugged him. Hua Jin, thank you. Mommy hugged Uncle Hua Jin. Shouldn't you give Daddy a big hug too? When Mu Yaja heard this, he turned his face away awkwardly. His face was strangely a little red. This was a little tsundere. He wasn't used to being too affectionate with her in front of so many people. He felt that he would be laughed at. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she sneaked over and tugged at the corner of his shirt. She even cleared her throat solemnly. Ahem. Sir, can you turn around? Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. Not knowing what she was doing, he turned around with a puzzled expression. Yun Shirshir suddenly threw herself into his arms and hugged his waist tightly. She hugged him, she was so strong, unwilling to let go for a long time. Mu Yaja's lips curved into a smile. Yun Shirshir raised her head to look at him, but she just could not get enough of his face. The first person she saw after regaining her vision was him. That was the happiest thing. She held his face in her hands and looked at him carefully. Her gaze kept focusing until she finally saw his face more clearly. She could still see those handsome eyes, high nose bridge, and thin lips. However, after experiencing Yue Yao, those eyes and brows had settled down and the sharpness of the past had been polished and smoothed out. Yun Shirshir's lips curved. She inched closer and stood on her tiptoes. Before she could take the initiative to give him a kiss, the man smiled dotingly and took the opportunity to wrap his arms around her waist. Then, he bent down and kissed her. This kiss was like a long-awaited reunion. It was a kind of lingering longing. It was too strange. They were clearly together every day. However, she felt that the time between seeing him again was really too long. This kiss was both familiar and unfamiliar. Yun Shirshir was grateful to be able to see the world clearly again. At this moment, a kind of sigh arose spontaneously from the bottom of her heart. To be able to have him involved in her life was the greatest blessing of her life. Chapter 3079. The sun was setting in the west. A week after she was discharged from the hospital, Yun Shirshir sat under the setting sun with little Yue Yao in her arms. She looked at the evening sky lazily. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen were beside their little sister. Yu Yu was in charge of telling her fairy tales, while Xiao Yichen was making funny faces as he played with the swaddled tiny tot. She snickered in her heart. She wondered if little Yue Yao could understand Yu Yu's stories. She opened her eyes wide and looked curiously at Yu Yu. Her mouth opened and closed, and from time to time, she would let out a crisp giggle that sounded like a silver bell. Mommy! Little sister is laughing. Will she be able to understand my stories? Yu Yu was a little excited. However, Xiao Yichen said, little sister is still so young. Of course she won't understand. She must think that you look funny, that's why she smiled. Yu Yu was so angry that he raised his fist and wanted to punch him. What do you mean fun? Mu Yichen. Give me a clear explanation. Mu Yichen made a funny face at him, turned around, and ran away. Yu Yu threw his book aside and chased after him. In the huge backyard, the two of them played together. Yun Shirshir was so happy that her heart was about to overflow just by looking at the two little clowns. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a car engine from outside the door. Xiao Yichen said excitedly, Daddy must be back. As he said that, the two little guys ran out of the door to welcome him. Yun Shirshir recalled that in the morning, Mu Yaja had whispered in her ear, Today, I'll go and finalize the details of the wedding. At that time, she had been in a daze and had mumbled a few words before falling asleep again. Now that she thought about it, he must have finalized the details of the wedding with the wedding planner. Yun Shirshir walked over with Yue Yao in her arms, only to see Mu Yaja, Gong Jie, Hua Jin, and a few other unfamiliar men standing next to the car. They were talking about something with relaxed expressions. Gong Jie's eyes were sharp. He saw Yun Shirshir and waved his hand. Sister. Mu Yaja looked over, only to see Yun Shirshir carrying Yue Yao under the setting sun, slowly walking towards him. The weather had turned cold, and she was wearing a knitted jacket. Her face was tranquil, and her beautiful hair was draped over her shoulders. From time to time, it would brush against her shoulders, and the gentle breeze would lift the corner of her skirt. She was quiet but charming. Yun Shirshir smiled faintly. Hubby! The man walked towards him. Such a handsome man, no matter which frame the time stopped at, was definitely an exquisite picture. As the sun set, The sunset fell on his body, gilding his tall and slender silhouette with a faint layer of golden light. He was as elegant as a god. Mu Yaja walked closer and took Yueyao from her arms. At this moment, Yueyao was already quietly asleep. Her eyes were closed, like a sleeping little angel. He looked at her with a gentle expression. She snuggled up to him. The quiet scene shocked the photographer at the wedding. He immediately raised his camera and aimed it at this scene, taking a picture of this beautiful moment. The sunset is so beautiful. The photographer looked at the photo in the camera and suggested with a smile, "Why don't we take a family photo together?" When Yu heard this, she clapped her hands and felt that this suggestion was not bad. Good, good. Family photo. Daddy, let's take a family photo together. Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir looked at each other and nodded. Under the shade of the tree, the sunset was mottled. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja stood in the middle, holding Yueyao in their arms. Beside them, Hua Jin and Gong Jie were holding Xiao Yichen and Yu respectively. They looked at the camera with smiles on their faces. 1, 2, 3. Smile. The photographer asked, "Is our bride-to-be beautiful?" Everyone said in unison, "Beautiful." Yun Shirshir was sandwiched in the middle. She couldn't help but blush. She looked at the camera and smiled shyly. The photographer made an okay gesture and showed the photo to them. When Yun Shirshir saw that Mu Yaja didn't look at the camera, she couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you going to look at it?" "No need." Mu Yaja hugged her shoulders and bowed his head. "I just want to look at you more." Yun Shirshir looked at him and the smile at the corner of her mouth became even brighter. Because she knew that her happiness wasn't over yet. Chapter 3080. Quote at the end of the day, blood ties are a very strange thing. It could bind two people together tightly, and it was the most intimate bond. But it can also mercilessly create an insurmountable gap between them. When I was young, I used to be glad that I had a brother like Dongyu who doted on me. I used to think that I was the happiest girl in the world. When I grew up, I hated that the man I loved so much that I couldn't extricate myself from had the same blood flowing in his veins. Along the way. From ignorant feelings to immature feelings, to a strong desire to be together forever, until we were forcibly separated by the world. How far is forever? In a single thought. Eternity is eternal. One wrong thought, and every step will lead to death. Dongyu, do you know that even though the world is so big, I have nowhere to go and no one to rely on? Whether it's God or anyone else, who can explain to me what love is? If no one can explain it clearly, then why can't I fall in love with Dongyu? This is a question that I still can't solve after leaving home for so long. For so many years, I've been searching for a balance between love and Dongyu, until I received the sudden news of my marriage. Shachuan, let me tell you a piece of good news. Your brother is getting married. When are you coming back for a gathering? Over the phone, my father's voice sounded weathered and uneasy. He chose his words carefully. Come home. Everyone misses you. Your mother and I, and your brother. Everyone misses you. At that moment, my breathing stopped. It was really like a boom. My mind went blank, and there was nothing left. This news, which made the whole family immerse in joy, suddenly threw me into eternal hell. Holding the receiver tightly, I was silent for a long time. Then I tried my best to suppress my trembling voice and said calmly, "Okay." After hanging up the call, I realized that the back of my hand was already sweaty. Father said, "Come home." But that was home, and yet it wasn't home. I never thought that reality would be so cruel. It was so cruel that one look at heaven and one look at hell. I used to think of him as my entire world, but I didn't expect this warm world to suddenly collapse like a cloud. And it came so suddenly. The next day, I booked a flight back to China. I knew that returning home this time was definitely not a wise choice. After waiting for such a long time, I thought that even if I were to give up, I should at least be more thorough. Let me see him with my own eyes. If he is really happy, then I should try to let go of this unforgettable relationship. The moment I got off the plane, I felt a lump in my throat. Looking at the crowd in front of me, I felt a stabbing pain in my heart and tears welled up in my eyes. I walked through the crowd with great difficulty, but my footsteps were very slow. Every step I took, I would stop, and from time to time, I would brush past strangers. I still remember that 8 years ago, when I left this city with a heart filled with despair, it was the same scene. Travelers who were in a hurry. Loved ones who left dejectedly. At that time, when they looked back before they left, everything within their sight seemed to be dyed with a layer of desolate gray, no longer having any color. Chapter 3081. Now that I was stepping foot on this land again, the city seemed to have changed a lot. The airport had been rebuilt, and the interior decoration was new. It looked very grand. Her ears were filled with the thick Beijing accent of her hometown. Although it was a long time since she had last heard it and was unfamiliar with it, she felt very warm in her heart. I was back. After 8 years, I was stepping foot on this land again. However, in my heart there was a little uneasiness, but more than that, there was a deep sadness in my heart. My mother had been waiting at the airport for a long time and had arrived early. She must have specially dressed up when she found out that I was coming back. After 8 years, when the mother and daughter met again, they didn't hug each other warmly like normal people. They only stood quietly and looked at each other. There was alienation and estrangement in their eyes. I think she must have sadly discovered the fleeting coldness in my eyes. From her face, it wasn't hard to see how much she wanted to go forward and hug me tightly. She wanted to tell me how much she missed me as a mother for the past 8 years. How she wanted to tell me how worried my family had been about me since I had been away for so long. Maybe she regretted what she did 8 years ago, I thought. However, all the words were stuck in her throat under my cold gaze. There were thousands of words, but she couldn't say them. Mom, I'm back. Amidst the noise, I smiled and broke the awkward silence between us. Only then did my mother come back to her senses. The corners of her mouth twitched with some difficulty. She laughed dryly and muttered, "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." As she spoke, she felt a little uneasy. As if to ease the awkwardness, she hurried forward to help me carry my luggage. Out of the corner of my eye, I subconsciously avoided her hand. In a daze, my mother's hand froze. "Mom, I'll do it myself." As I said this, there was no change in my expression. I knew that my cold gaze must have made my mother's heart ache a little because I saw a sudden look of pain on her face. I suddenly realized that these 8 years, which was neither a long nor short period of time, seemed to have been like a great flood that washed away the dependence and connection between mother and daughter. "Xiachuan, do you still hate me? 8 years ago. I had no choice but to send you out of the country. I'm doing this for your own good." A smile appeared on my face, but I said nothing. After a long while I sighed. I know, so you really don't have to explain so much." She gave me a deep look. "Xiachuan, is the luggage heavy? Let Mom do it for you." Her mother's voice was very soft and even trembled slightly. She said carefully, "Let me carry it for you." "Xiachuan, I want to carry your luggage for you." I was bewildered. I lifted my head and saw that she was frowning. Now, she seemed a little humble. I pursed my lips and nodded silently, allowing my mother to take the luggage from me. As we walked out of the airport, my mother tried to hold my hand. This time, I didn't avoid it. Mother's eyes were filled with comfort. Chapter 3082. When he heard that you were coming back, your father was overjoyed. He didn't sleep well last night. He tossed and turned nervously. He kept saying that he was waiting for you to come back today so that he could cook for you. She bought fresh vegetables early in the morning. She's probably still busy at home now. Sitting in the taxi, her mother smiled and chattered. Gradually, she let go of her worries. I smiled but didn't say anything. My gaze was indifferent through the car window. "It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." As my mother spoke in the rearview mirror, the corners of her eyes couldn't help but moisten. However, she secretly wiped away the tears with her fingertips, not wanting me to see them. "Mom." I silently looked out the window at the unfamiliar street scene. My eyelids drooped slightly as I interrupted her indifferently. I asked hesitantly, "Is he all right?" She knew who I was talking about, so she fell silent and the smile on her face faded. "Dongyu, he has always been thinking about you." I vaguely remember that not long after I was born, the first word I could say was brother. The first name I said when I was learning to speak was also his name. Dongyu. For as long as I could remember, the thing that left the deepest impression on me wasn't my mother's gentle whispers, nor my father's broad shoulders, but his warm arms. My name was Een Shachuan. I was born on the hottest day of summer. His name was Een Dong-yu. He was born during the coldest time of winter. He was my brother, 4 years older than me. When I was young, my parents were busy with work and the family of 4 rarely spent time together. At that time, the 2 of us were fostered at my grandmother's house in the countryside, and Dong-yu was my greatest support. Dong-yu was very good-looking. He had inherited his mother's good looks. He had delicate features and was very handsome, especially his pair of clear black and white eyes. One look at them was enough to make people lose their souls. Therefore, there were many girls who liked Dong-yu since he was young. However, perhaps because he was born in winter, Dong-yu's personality was a little cold. He had been too distant from other children since he was young. Even his parents were a little distant. This coldness became even more obvious during the rebellious period of his youth. And from the beginning to the end, I was the only one who could freely get close to him. Perhaps it's because we're blood-related, but Dong-yu dotes on me to the bone. Even his parents couldn't compare to this kind of love. According to Grandma, when I was born, Dong-yu was still very young. He had thin arms and legs, and there wasn't a single ounce of flesh on his arms. However, he was able to carry me steadily and never fell. At that time, after my mother gave birth, she wasn't in good health. Before I was a month old, she asked Grandma to take care of me. Dong-yu, on the other hand, followed her silently. He had never been close to anyone since he was young, but he liked to hug me and play with me, calling my nickname over and over again. Chun-chun, chun-chun. When I cried, he patiently teased me. When I was hungry, he gently coaxed me. At night, it was Dong-yu who hugged me and sang nursery rhymes to sleep. Whenever Grandma brought up the past, she would laugh and sigh as she told me how much your brother doted on you. Yes, it really dotes on me. I naively thought that even if Dong-yu was the only person in the world who doted on me, I would still be the happiest girl in the world. I remember Grandma mentioning that when I was 1 year old, Dong-yu held my little hand and taught me how to walk step by step. Chapter 3083. I was chubby from being raised by my grandmother, and I wore a lot of winter clothes. With great difficulty, I staggered towards him with my arms outstretched. In a moment of carelessness, I fell. Although it wasn't serious, a layer of skin was scraped off my palm. Before I could cry out loud, Dong-yu's eyes reddened. He hugged me in a panic. For the first time in my life, I showed an expression other than gentleness and indifference on his face. As I grew older, I could run more steadily and gradually became sturdier. I played with the other children, playing hide-and-seek and catching cicadas. It was truly a frenzy. When I was young, I loved nighttime the most. At that time, we were still young and there were no inhibitions. Every night, Grandma would bathe Dong-yu. When I was young, I didn't know shame and would climb into the bathtub with him on all fours. I especially liked to tease him. I would even point at Dong-yu's undeveloped little guy and ask Grandma why my brother's part was different from mine. Grandma would always laugh at my teasing. She would scratch the bridge of my nose and laugh at me for being shameless. On the other hand, Dong-yu was a little shy, so much so that when I was naked next to him, he froze and didn't dare to move. Grandma would apply the shower gel on us. I liked the refreshing smell, and I liked it even more when I smelled the same as Dong-yu's. I was afraid of the dark and didn't like to sleep with Grandma, but I was willing to share a small bed with Dong-yu. At night, I would often wrap my little arms and legs around him without restraint, pestering him to play rock, paper, scissors. This boring game became the most interesting pastime. When the moon was high in the sky, I couldn't sleep. I liked to lie beside him, hold my little head, and listen to him sing and tell stories. Dong-yu's voice was very pleasant. It was as clear as a wind chime, with a hint of childishness. He gently sang in my ear. At that time, he only knew a few songs, and they were from music class. However, I never got tired of listening to them. Every night in my childhood, I would fall asleep peacefully with this soft song. In my memories of my youth, Dong-yu was somewhat bland. He always locked himself in his own world, either doing his homework or reading classics outside of class. He had been taking piano lessons since he was 6 years old. Hence, I often pestered him to teach me how to play the piano. At that time, in the eyes of many children, Dong-yu was cold and unapproachable. He was so noble and aloof. Thinking of his background from the city, he was not like these wild children who grew up playing mud and catching frogs in the countryside. His body was clean, and there was a bit of scholarly elegance. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary child could have. Good etiquette and refined speech were used by many parents as teaching materials for their children. The only thing I remember is that I had a conflict with a boy named Dodo. The two of us wrestled in the yellow sand. I was not his match and was defeated. I was surrounded by other children and sent home. My body was dirty from head to toe and there were bruises all over my body. My eyes were red and swollen because of the sand that got into my eyes. Chapter 3084. Children are a little pretentious. When I saw Dongyu, my tears, which had stopped, gushed out again. I simply let go of my throat and cried earth-shattering tears. The more I cried, the more ashen Dongyu's face became. Even his hands, which were holding a towel to wipe me, couldn't help but tremble. I thought that at that time, he must have hated the person who bullied me to the core. At least, I had never seen Dongyu have such a terrifying gaze. It was gloomy and filled with hatred, so much so that his hands were abnormally stiff. "Does it hurt?" he asked tenderly as he wiped me clean. I nodded aggrievedly and pointed pitifully at a few spots on my body. I whimpered and hugged his shoulders tightly, whimpering in silent accusation. Immediately after, I felt a trace of desire on my shoulder. It was affectionate and pitiful. "Don't be afraid." His voice was slightly hoarse. "I'm here. Don't cry." At that moment, my emotions calmed down. After the shower, he applied the ointment on me and instructed me to rest in his bedroom for a while. I was tired from crying, so I fell into a deep sleep soon after. I didn't know how long I'd slept, but in the evening, I was suddenly woken up by a commotion in the living room. Outside the window, the sky had already darkened. I ran to the door and pried open a crack. Through the crack, I could vaguely see the scene in the living room. I seemed to hear Daodu crying, followed by the endless argument between the adults and Grandma. "Your Dongyu has beaten my son to this state. And you say it's fine? Children's quarrel? How could a child do such a thing? What did my Daodu do to offend him? Did he have to be so ruthless? Auntie, I'm usually polite to you because you're an old lady. But what's the matter today? No matter what, your family has to give me an explanation. I think your Dongyu usually looks." From my point of view, I could only vaguely make out the outline of Dongyu's thin back. He just stood there quietly, without any explanation or debate. Even in the face of harsh criticism, he never frowned. I was a little frightened and hid in my room, not daring to go out. I just stared blankly at the scene in the living room. After the argument, Daodu's family left angrily. Grandma frowned and sighed as she turned around. She rubbed her forehead with a headache and asked, "Dongyu, why did you hit Daodu?" Dongyu didn't say anything. The old man got anxious and stomped his feet, urging him a few more times. "Say something." He remained silent for a long time. Suddenly, he stubbornly raised his small face, and a cold expression appeared on his face. "Serves him right." A loud smack was heard. "Don't say that. Fighting is wrong. Dongyu, you have to be sensible and apologize." "He bullied my sister first," Dongyu said angrily. "It's his fault. I'm not wrong. I won't apologize." Grandma was also stunned. After a long pause she said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, "I don't know who you take after. You're so stubborn and unforgiving." After that incident, none of the boys in the village dared to bully me again. They must be extremely afraid of Dongyu. However, to girls, Dongyu always had an indescribable charm. Hence, there were many little girls in the village who admired Dongyu. With more or less selfish motives, they tried to get close to me. Chapter 3085. It's the school holidays. Why don't I see your brother? Shachuan, why don't you ask your brother to come out and play? The children surrounded me and pestered me. They didn't even hesitate to give me their pocket money to buy candy for me. I was a little greedy at that time, and after receiving the benefits, I was foolishly bought over. Naturally, I took their words to heart. Hence, after dinner, I pestered Dongyu, who was walking towards the study. Without a word, I dragged him to the square in the village. When I saw Dongyu's expressionless face darkening as he was surrounded by a group of children, I suddenly couldn't feel happy at all. The candy in my mouth became tasteless. For the first time in my life, I tasted sourness in the sweet little Dragon Man candy. Ever since I was young, I had hoped that my brother would play with us. However, when such a day came, I felt awkward. Pushing Dongyu into the middle of the children seemed like a huge mistake. I hated it when other girls tried to hold his hand. I hated it when others tried to get close to him in a very intimate manner. I hated it when those people tried to draw his attention. I suddenly regretted selling Dongyu out for a few pieces of soft candy. As for Dongyu, he didn't seem to like interacting too much with other children. He wasn't like the boys his age, who were full of vigor and vitality. He always exuded an overly calm aura. At the time, I didn't know that there was such a person in the world. He was mature before he even grew up. In his youth, Dongyu didn't seem to be naive. Instead, he protected me under his wings like an adult. On the way home, I silently held Dongyu's hand and held it tightly. After a moment of silence, I opened my mouth unhappily. I said, "Dongyu, I don't like you playing with others." Dongyu looked down at me and couldn't help but laugh. "You were the one who led me here." I pouted, feeling unhappy. Hence, I started to kick up a fuss. I said, "Don't play with them anymore, okay? Just play with me." When Dongyu heard this, his eyes curved and the corners of his lips curled into a gentle smile. He pinched my cheek lovingly but didn't answer. But I knew he would listen to me. Every time I thought of this childhood memory, I felt that I was lucky. Life was long, and not everyone could tolerate someone's unreasonable behavior. Among the children, there was a little girl named Menglon who was on good terms with me. She was 3 years older than me. One day, she held my hand and whispered to me, "Shachuan, when I grow up, I'll be your sister-in-law, okay?" I didn't understand and frowned. Sister-in-law? What's a sister-in-law? A sister-in-law means to be your brother's wife and marry him in the future. Marry my brother? I still didn't understand. Yes, just like your father and mother. After you get married, you live together and have children. I stood up and pushed her away coldly. And I'll be together with him in the future. Menglon was pushed to the ground by me. Her face was flushed red, but when she heard my words, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Shachuan, you can't be together. You are siblings. My mother said that siblings can't get married." Why? Chapter 3086. In any case, I don't want you to be my sister-in-law. After that, I ran home. I held onto Grandma's hand and kept asking. However, Grandma only thought that I had a deep sibling relationship with Dongyu and treated it as child's talk. Hence, she smiled and said, "All right, if Shachuan wants to be with Dongyu, then so be it. In the future, our Shachuan will marry Dongyu and be his wife. Grandma will keep her word and make the decision for you." I was relieved to hear this. From then on, because of Dongyu, my relationship with Menglon fell into an ice cellar and I completely cut off all contact with the other children. Wherever Dongyu went, I followed him like a little tail. At that time, it was as if there was a wall that separated us from the rest of the world. However, every time I dreamed in the middle of the night, Menglon's words echoed in my mind like an oath. I felt indignant and hugged Dongyu's neck tightly until he woke up from his dream. In his sleepy state, he caressed my cheek. "What's wrong? Brother, will you be with another girl in the future?" Menglon said that she wants to marry you in the future and be your wife and my sister-in-law. Under the moonlight, I could vaguely see him frown. The young me was so uneasy. I choked and pleaded, "Brother, I don't want you to get married. I don't want you to be with another girl. Can you be with me? 100 years, a lifetime together." Dongyu didn't speak. After a moment of silence, he hugged me tighter and whispered in my ear, "What if I don't live for 100 years? No matter how many years it takes, we have to be together," I said with a pout. In the darkness, I couldn't see his expression clearly. I only heard him smile. "All right, we'll be together forever." I was overjoyed. I couldn't help but hold his face and kiss his warm, thin lips. Dongyu grabbed my little hand and responded to my pure kiss. It was a tender kiss, just lips against each other. There was no finesse to it, but it stirred my heart. At that time, we were young and had no concept of the relationship between a man and a woman, nor did we understand the meaning of such an intimate kiss. However, until a long time later, I still didn't understand why I wanted him so much. I asked myself this question more than once, but there was no answer. Later I thought, Who asked him to spoil me so much? He spoiled me so much that I was out of control. With this kind of spoiling, it seemed that other people's love couldn't be considered love anymore. At the end of the day, I was just a spoiled child. As I grew older, my personality became like Dong-Yu's for a long time. Gradually, I became cold to others and became not good at socializing. I didn't even like to get close to others. It seemed that only Dong-Yu could affect my emotions. Whether I was happy or sad, it seemed to only concern him. Slowly, I reached the age of going to school. I went to the same school as Dong-Yu. I'm in the 1st grade and he's in the 4th. When I first picked up the textbook and smelled the fragrance of the books, I felt like I had been locked in a huge cage, and the world before me was gray. I was surrounded by an unfamiliar environment, unfamiliar people, unfamiliar faces, and unfamiliar voices. Without Dong-Yu, I became unhappy. I became depressed. I even ignored the friendliness of my classmates. I didn't even want to talk to them. Chapter 3087. Thinking back to those years, throughout my entire academic life, I must have been a very reclusive person in the eyes of my classmates. After such a long time, I've long gotten used to the world of the two of us. It's probably because I've been used to spending time with Dong-Yu since I was young. Without him by my side, whenever a stranger invades, I subconsciously arm myself. During that period of youth, I was too quiet in class. During class, I would look down at my textbook. After class, I would look out the window. Amidst the noisy fighting, I would stare silently at the window in a daze. On the 2nd floor of the opposite building was Dong-Yu's classroom, which was opposite my class. Dong-Yu would also lean against the windowsill and quietly look at me. Even if we couldn't talk, we still enjoyed it. Hence, the few minutes of break between classes became the time I yearned for the most. The day's classes became the most unbearable sea for me. Hence, when the school bell rang, I suddenly felt alive and beautiful. The 4th grade class often ended very late, and mine ended early. Hence, I liked to tiptoe and lean against the windowsill, shaking my head as I waited for him. Over time, the people in Dong-Yu's class became familiar with me and would even tease me. Sometimes, when I got bored of waiting, I would do somersaults in the corridor outside the classroom. I even did a handstand. I would often fall and knock my head, but I never got tired of it. However, I didn't want to make Dong-Yu anxious. Every time I fell while doing a handstand, he would immediately stand up. Once when I went overboard, the teacher rushed out aggressively with a ruler. He pointed at me and lectured, "Which class's child is so restless? We're still in class. Hurry up and go home." I was stunned by the scolding. Pinching the corner of my shirt, I said aggrievedly, "Teacher, I'm waiting for my brother to go home." The teacher turned to look inside the classroom and asked angrily in a low voice, "What's your brother's name?" I immediately shut my mouth, not wanting to betray Dong-Yu. However, a thin figure stood up quietly near the window. "Teacher Shui. She's my sister." Dong-Yu's tone was calm and unruffled. Teacher Shui's teaching style was famous in town for being strict and dignified. At that time, there was no such thing as a harmonious teacher-student relationship. Corporal punishment was common. Naturally, Dong-Yu didn't end well for himself. Teacher Shui swung the ruler and slapped him hard on the shoulder a few times, then punished him by making him stand at the door of the classroom. His school bag was also mercilessly thrown out, but he was not allowed to pick it up. I had never seen such a detestable teacher. I was dumbfounded. I stared blankly at the books all over the floor and cried out in sadness. Dong-Yu looked at me and laughed helplessly, pretending not to care. "I'm bored in class. Your homeroom teacher is so fierce." I secretly spoke ill of his teacher. He smiled and said, "The senior students have to change their form teacher. If you're not paying attention in class, you'll be punished severely." I was scared and shrunk my shoulders. After class, the students filed out. Some of them didn't pay attention to their feet and stepped on Dong-Yu's textbook until the pages were torn. Only a few girls carefully moved the textbook away from the teacher's sight. Without old Shui's approval, no one dared to help. Chapter 3088. At the time, I didn't know that his shoulder had already been bruised by those few strokes. I just cried silently. There was frustration, hatred for old Shui, and heartache for Dong-Yu. After that incident, I didn't go to his class to disturb him again. Instead, I waited obediently at the school gate for his class to end. I thought that after that, without me causing a ruckus at the entrance of Dongyu's class, it must have been much quieter. Since he was young, Dongyu had been very popular with girls. This phenomenon didn't change even when he was in school. However, he wasn't close to girls, and his daily interactions with them were distant. However, perhaps it was his cold aura that attracted many girls to him. Or perhaps, in terms of appearance, he was especially outstanding in school. His handsome face was indeed an asset. He often received a table full of gifts and love letters, as well as cards that were popular at the time. Those girls were especially interesting. Apart from the love letters with delicate handwriting, there were also pencils, erasers, rulers, compasses, drawing boards. There were even comic books, cartoon cards, toys, and all kinds of strange gifts. Most of the time, Dongyu contributed them to the rubbish bin. Sometimes, when I realized that there was something I was particularly interested in among the gifts and wanted to take it, Dongyu would stop me and willingly throw it away. I was a little puzzled. Since they gave it to you, why did you throw it away? Dongyu smiled and replied lightly, if I don't throw it away, I'm afraid of being misunderstood. I didn't really understand what he meant. Every time after school, I would wait for him at the school gate to go home together, regardless of whether it was morning or evening. When we got home, I would often pester him to carry me on his back. He would never refuse. Every time this happened, he would lovingly scratch my nose and squat down. Come on up, little sloth. I happily lay on his back and hugged his shoulders. I felt so smug that it was as if I was sitting on a hydrogen balloon and flying high into the sky. Just as he said, I was famous for being a little sloth. When I got home from school, I threw my bag on the bed and lay on the sofa. I stretched my limbs and refused to move. I didn't like to study, nor was I good at schoolwork. Homework was even more of a headache. Hence, when I couldn't finish my homework every day, he could only do it for me. He was angry and helpless at the same time. He asked me, will I still have to worry about my homework when I enter university? Coming back to the topic, he smiled again and said, I think with my level, I might not be able to go to university. I pouted and changed the topic. Brother, don't you want to go to a university? No. Now is not the time to think about university aspirations. I imitated his tone and said, it's not the time for you to worry about whether I can get into university or not. Dongyu was stunned by my words. After a long while, he stroked my head. Yes, eldest miss. But in reality? I'm not stupid. I'm just not motivated. Or maybe at that time, I didn't have the heart to study and my head was full of playful thoughts, but I didn't fall behind in my homework. Because when Dongyu was doing my homework for me, I was always by his side. As I watched, I got the gist of it. His favorite childhood season was summer. Especially during the summer holidays. Chapter 3089. In the fields and wheat fields, I always found a way to exhaust my energy. Finally, as the sun set, I reluctantly took Dongyu's hand and set off home. Dongyu and I each had a bicycle. Dongyu's bicycle was a giant given to him by his father on his 11th birthday. At that time, it cost a few hundred yuan each. Ordinary people would shrink back at such a price. As for my ride, it was the one Dongyu rode when he was young. There were two small wheels on both sides of the rear wheel to balance it out. When I was riding it, my father removed the two small wheels. After cleaning them, they looked like new again. Look, each of us has a bicycle. Shachuan, haven't you been clamoring for a bicycle? Here. I'll let you ride Dongyu's bicycle, okay? Sure. I didn't feel aggrieved at all. Instead, I treated Dongyu's bicycle like a treasure. During the summer vacation, he and I would each have a bicycle. Under the scorching sun, we would ride our bicycles in the wind. The other children were envious of us. At that time, as we rode our bicycles, a group of children chased after us enviously, looking at us curiously. It felt so good. Everyone liked the feeling of being envied and yearned for. Especially as Dongyu's younger sister, I felt a sense of self-satisfaction. When we got hot from riding, we would park the bicycle at home. The two of us would hold hands and go to the small supermarket in town to buy a popsicle. We didn't spend much every day. 2 yuan was just enough for each of us to buy a popsicle. However, I was a greedy little cat. When I came across something I liked, I ate it especially quickly. In no time, I had licked the popsicle clean. At this point, Dongyu had only taken a bite out of the popsicle in his hand. Every time this happened, I would put on an aggrieved expression and look at him eagerly, staring at the popsicle in his hand. Why did you eat it so quickly? Because I'm afraid it'll melt. Dongyu would always be amused by my various excuses. Hence, the two of us shared a popsicle. You took a bite, I took a bite, and his popsicle was completely digested. The days of youth were always nostalgic. At that time, I never thought that such a carefree life would quietly change after Dongyu was admitted to junior high school. Dongyu and I went to primary school in our hometown. Back then, family planning was prevalent. My birth was outside the system. With Dongyu, there shouldn't be me. My existence is entirely due to an accident. When Dongyu was 2 years old, perhaps my parents couldn't help themselves and accidentally gave birth to me. Logically speaking, they should have aborted me, but my mother couldn't bear to do it. After all, I was her own flesh and blood. Hence, after much discussion, she ran back to the countryside and secretly gave birth to me. When she was pregnant, my mother had a big belly and had to hide from place to place. After giving birth to me, she hid me at my grandmother's house. In order to avoid the Family Planning Commission, I didn't register until later and was eligible to enroll. Even so, his family still paid a hefty price. Later, Dongyu graduated from primary school. In the year of his junior high school entrance examination, Dongyu lived up to everyone's expectations and got into a key junior high school in the city. Chapter 3090. It was my first time stepping into a brand new apartment building. It was my first time seeing an elevator. The small but exquisite 3 rooms and 2 living rooms were filled with novelty. I felt uneasy, but at the same time, I felt an inexplicable sense of anticipation. This way, the family of 4 could be reunited. When I was in primary school, although my parents often came back, they weren't always by my side, so it was inevitable that we would feel distant. But everything in the city was new. After moving to the city, I quickly got used to it. But the only thing I wasn't used to was Dongyu and I were sleeping in separate rooms. Dongyu, you're all grown up. You're going to be a big boy soon. You can't sleep with your sister anymore. Mother lectured us seriously. In the past, it might not have been a big deal for you to sleep in the same bed. But now, Dongyu is in junior high school and is already 13 years old. You're 10 years old. It's time to try to be independent. Chun, you'll sleep alone in your room tonight. It was almost an order, and there was no room for refusal. I looked at her blankly, uneasy about sleeping alone. I don't want to. I immediately shook my head like a broken drum and hugged Dongyu tightly, refusing to let go. I don't want to sleep in separate rooms from my brother. This is outrageous. Father muttered at the side. He's not a child anymore. Dongyu is already so old. How can he keep sleeping in the same bed as you? What does that look like? At that time, I didn't understand why they had to split us up this way. Because back in my hometown, Dongyu and I had always slept in the same bed and slept on the same bed. I was used to sleeping with him in my arms. I definitely wasn't used to sleeping alone. But how would I know then? Dongyu was 13 years old, at the age of puberty. This puberty didn't just refer to the development of height, weight, and vocal cords. It was the most important part of a teenager's development. Sexual development. My understanding of this was zero. Hence, I didn't understand why Mother was so insistent on sleeping in separate rooms. On the night we slept in separate rooms, I lay on the bed, hugging the blanket, but tears kept falling. My imagination was surprisingly rich. Without Dongyu by my side, I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. I kept having the feeling that there was a face outside the window and a person hiding under the bed. Outside the crack in the door, there seemed to be someone eyeing us covetously. It was as if he was besieged on all sides. Trapped in the fear of the dark night, I didn't even dare to stretch my feet out of the bed. I was afraid that there would be a hand under the bed that would grab my feet at any moment and drag me into the endless abyss of hell. In the end, I cried, feeling wronged. I muttered to myself, "Why is my mother so cruel?" So cruel. Then, he fell asleep in a daze. The next few days were even more miserable. Before going to bed, after my mother left, I couldn't wait to turn on the lights. It was as if the strange evil spirits would retreat as soon as I turned on the lights. I don't know where such a stupid idea came from. The world of children is always so naive. Of course, turning on the lights to sleep gave him some peace of mind. But the next day, his mother would always find out that he didn't turn off the lights to sleep, and then he would be severely reprimanded. One night, I tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep. So I tiptoed into Dongyu's room. Chapter 3091. At that moment, a great sense of security welled up in my heart. I walked to his bed and squatted down gently. I lay quietly by the bed and looked at him. I felt a great sense of peace. However, I only dared to lie down like this. I didn't dare to get on the bed for fear of alerting him. I didn't know how long I had been like this until midnight. Dongyu was woken up by the sound of a wild cat outside the window. She turned over and seemed to have heard my shallow breathing. She opened her eyes and saw me. "You?" He was a little surprised. "Why aren't you in your room?" When I heard this, I cried aggrievedly and said, "There's a ghost in my room. I'm scared." Dongyu was stunned. The moonlight shone through the windowsill, and I could clearly see his amused expression. "Silly, where did the ghost come from?" "I'm scared. I keep feeling like there's a ghost under the bed, outside the window, and outside the door. It's like countless pairs of eyes are staring at me, watching me." Dongyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry at my exaggerated description. However, he naturally knew that it was a waste of time to debate these supernatural matters with me. Hence, I saw him smile and make way for me. I was stunned. Seeing that I was still in a daze, he asked playfully, "Do you want to squat here all night?" "Of course not." He gently patted the empty space with his hand, looking a little helpless. "Come up and sleep." I was a little worried and embarrassed. "If Mom wakes you up in the morning and sees me sleeping in the same bed as you, she'll definitely scold me again." Dongyu didn't think much of it. "You're so mischievous. Haven't you been scolded enough?" When I heard this, I felt that it made sense. Hence, I nimbly climbed onto the bed. Dongyu covered me with the blanket and said reproachfully, "Mom is right. We're all grown up. We can't sleep in the same bed anymore." "Why?" I was puzzled. "Isn't it good to be like before?" I turned around and saw a strange expression on his face. He seemed to be avoiding it. He only said lightly, "I'll wake you up early tomorrow morning. Before they wake up, go back to your room." Then, what about in the future? I smiled mischievously. "In the future, just like today, I'll sneak into your room and sleep with you. Then, I'll go back to my room in the morning. Sleep early." He still didn't answer my question directly. Instead, he patted my head gently and hugged me to sleep. I looked up and saw his closed eyes. Her long eyelashes were closed quietly, dark and thick. I hugged him back and slept soundly the entire night. However, in the morning, the pain of getting out of bed came. After Dongyu woke me up, he chased me back to my room. I got up reluctantly, feeling like I was made of iron and the bed was made of magnets. Dongyu was getting anxious. As he mumbled, he groped his way back to his room. In the morning, the sky was already bright. Of course, I wasn't afraid of those monsters. I lay on the bed and slept soundly. From then on, at night, after my parents were asleep, Dongyu would come to my room. Just like when they were young, the two of them slept on the same bed and under the same blanket, hugging each other to sleep. Chapter 3092. During the junior high school entrance exam, my mother filled in the application form for me with her eyes closed. She was ambitious. With a stroke of her pen, she filled in the second key junior high school in the city for me. At that time, only students with excellent grades were qualified to take the school selection exam. I did not disappoint. When I was in the 6th grade, I worked a little harder. The so-called hard work was just listening attentively in class, and my grades improved by leaps and bounds. I actually came in first in the class for the primary school graduation exam. Many people's eyes popped out of their sockets. I successfully brought home the school selection application form. My mother was so shocked that she almost lost her footing. During dinner, my father kept lamenting that I had a smart brain, but I was too lazy in my studies. With excellent results in the school selection exam, I received the acceptance letter without any suspense. Throughout the summer vacation, I was instantly promoted from a servant to a princess. In the past, when I was not doing well in my studies, my mother would instruct me to do housework. She said that girls had to learn to do it sooner or later. If I didn't do well in my studies, I wouldn't be able to do much in the future. Hence, from a young age, she had to train me. When I heard this, I didn't think much of it. I thought that my future would be limitless. However, even though I received the acceptance letter, I still felt a little regretful. Because that year, Dongyu received the acceptance letter from a key provincial high school. We were separated by 3 years, but it felt like we were separated by an entire youth. Some people say that junior high school is the starting point of a teenager's journey. Many of the first awakening of love and many of the young and inexperienced memories began here. During the summer vacation after I graduated from primary school, I often fantasized about what junior high school would be like. At that time, there were many teen idol dramas with school backgrounds on the television. Hence, I began to wonder if school life in real life would be like those scenes in those idol dramas. Of course, this idea was completely disillusioned in the first week of junior high school when I was faced with a thick stack of homework. The so-called youth had probably been strangled alive in piles of exercise books. Why is there so much homework? Every time I got home, I threw my heavy bag on the sofa and couldn't help but grumble. I don't even know what the teachers for the various subjects look like, but there's a thick stack of all kinds of exercise books. Dongyu passed by and gently hit me on the head with a newspaper in his hand. There will be more in the future. At that time, he was already a first-year high school student. Every time he returned home, his homework would be spread out on the table, and it would always be a spectacular sight. Now, it's finally my turn to have a taste of it. Dongyu, I whined. Before I could beg him, he said coldly, "Don't expect me to do your homework for you." After junior high school, I couldn't spend every moment with Dongyu. The days of sitting by the window and being able to see him whenever she turned her head in elementary school were long gone. Fortunately, our schools weren't far from each other. I would sneak into his school after school ended early. The school he was studying at was a provincial high school, so it was heavily guarded. However, there was a wall at the back of the field. It wasn't very high, so I could climb over it. His classes ended late, so I would wander around his school. The library, the music room, the playground, and even the teacher's office. Chapter 3093. In that era, the control over the students was extremely strict. The so-called school bell, class bell, and department bell were not something that the current university bell could compare to. Middle school and high school were strict about makeup and hair dye. Even a tuft of fringe was not allowed to cover one's eyes. Boys had short hair that could not cover their ears and eyebrows. It was best to have a uniform buzz cut. What about girls? They couldn't have disheveled hair and had to wear it in a ponytail. It was best to have a clean face and not have an extra strand of hair between one's eyebrows. It was refreshing. Therefore, the girls who were called the school belle at that time were all natural. When I was in middle school, I couldn't say that I was unparalleled in beauty, but my watery eyes, clear black and white, delicate oval face, red lips and white teeth, my pretty face did cause me a lot of trouble. For example, if I was watching someone play basketball, I didn't know who I had offended, but this huge basketball would fly towards me for no reason and hit me on the forehead. At that time, I couldn't see through the good intentions behind this accident, nor did I know that the ball was coming from a calculated angle. I was secretly glad that the angle of the basketball was humane and didn't hit my nose. Otherwise, my nose bridge would have been broken. Even so, when it hit my forehead, it hurt so much that tears immediately fell from my eyes. At that time, a delicate-looking young man walked toward me. I covered my forehead and looked up at him, only to see the culprit with his hands on his hips and a mischievous smile on his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose." He didn't apologize sincerely, but his eyes were full of viciousness. My first meeting with Su Chi was an accident in my life. At that time, girls didn't have so many strange nicknames for the school belle they admired like now. Little Fresh Meat, National Hubby, Peerless Beauty, none of them. There was only one highest praise a girl could give a boy, and that was the school belle. Other than the self-proclaimed school belle, there were only 2 recognized in number 1 high school. One was Een Dong-yu, and the other was Su Chi. He had a very clean face without any impurities. His fair skin added a lot to his sunny and handsome temperament. It's a pity that I'm not one of those love-struck girls. Otherwise, I'd definitely be mesmerized by this handsome boy at first glance. His devilish smile and frown would definitely be mesmerized. Seeing that his apology wasn't sincere, I got angry and stood up. I picked up my bag and was about to leave. He immediately grabbed my hand from behind, his expression a little awkward. "You're injured. I'll take you to the infirmary." "No need." "Really?" He walked in front of me, glanced at my forehead and frowned. "It's already broken. If it's not treated in time, it'll probably leave a scar." When I heard this, I was really shocked. Ignoring his intentions, I said awkwardly, "It won't take long to treat the wound, right? I'm still waiting for someone." Seeing my compromise, he smiled, showing his white teeth. "It won't take long." He turned around and returned the basketball amidst the whistling of the crowd. Then, he took me to the infirmary after greeting everyone. In the infirmary, I sat on the bed a little uneasily. The health teacher wasn't around. He found the first aid kit and walked over to clean my wound. Chapter 3094. Only then did I size him up formally. He had a head of black hair and delicate facial features. His hair was close to his ears, and there was a diamond stud on his ear. It was especially popular at the time. If one were to evaluate his looks fairly, he would definitely be considered outstanding among the students. Coupled with his height of 1.8 meters, he should be very popular among the girls. As he treated my wound, he asked, "Judging from your school uniform, you're not a student from First High School." "Yes. I'm waiting for someone after school." "Oh? Waiting for your boyfriend?" he asked half jokingly, half tentatively. I snorted. "What does that have to do with you?" Probably because he had never met a girl who spoke to him like that, he found it extremely novel. "You're so funny. Why don't we be friends? My name is Su-Chi. What about you? You want to be friends with me, but I don't think you're sincere at all." I said that just to reject him in disguise. But he seemed to have misunderstood me. The next second, I saw him move closer to me. He held my chin with his hand and kissed me gently on the lips. Is this considered sincere? I stared at him in surprise. It took me 5 seconds to react. I had been kissed. I didn't know what kind of boy Su-Chi used to be. Later, I heard my brother mention that he was the school hunk in high school. He had a pure appearance, fair skin, clear eyes, and a high nose bridge. Just his height of 1.8 meters was enough to make most girls unable to resist. Plus, he was good at basketball, so he was given the title of Slam Dunk Prince. Probably because he had such a face that could bring disaster to the country, he felt that girls couldn't resist his charm. If it were any other girl, his kiss would probably be the beginning of a romantic relationship on campus. But to me, it was a great violation. I was shocked and pushed him away. I quickly wiped my lips with my sleeve and roared at him. "What are you doing?" As soon as I said that, my eyes immediately turned red. In my eyes, kissing was equivalent to the highest level of intimacy. His gentle caress caught me off guard, and my tears started to fall. He looked at me and held his forehead in frustration. "Why are you crying again?" "You're a bully." Didn't you say that I wasn't sincere enough? I thought you were the same as those girls." As Su-Chi spoke, he reached out to wipe away my tears. I covered my face, not letting him touch me. For a moment, he was at a loss of what to do. But he did, and because of that I know his name. "Su-Chi." The door suddenly opened and a girl walked in while shouting, "I was wondering why I couldn't find you." It turns out, halfway through her words she saw me, and her expression changed for the worse. I followed the voice and looked at her. It was a girl with delicate features in a tall uniform. She glanced at Su-Chi and then at me, her expression gradually becoming displeased. "Hey, who are you?" I don't know why, but she was hostile towards me. "You're not wearing Gao's uniform. Don't you know that students from other schools can't come in?" My heart skipped a beat, and I cursed under my breath. I hurriedly got up from the bed and prepared to leave. Su-Chi took my hand as if the girl was air and asked, "You haven't told me your name yet." Chapter 3095. Why should I tell you? How am I supposed to woo you if you don't tell me your name? Su-Chi's words were shocking. The girl's eyes widened in shock. She was also shocked by his words. "Su-Chi, what are you talking about?" I frowned, not wanting to be entangled with them any longer. "I'm leaving." "No." Su-Chi walked around to stand in front of me and said stubbornly, "You can't leave until you tell me your name." "You?" In a fit of anger I said, "I already have a boyfriend." "You have a boyfriend?" Suchi was a little surprised and asked in an unfriendly tone, "You're lying to me." "In Dong-yu," I said to him, "he's my boyfriend. Are you satisfied now?" "Dong-yu." The girl's expression turned even uglier. "How is that possible? Dong-yu is the class monitor of our class, a top student. I've never heard him mention that he has a girlfriend. Can't a top student be in a relationship? Besides, who are you? Why does he have to report to you?" The girl was rendered speechless by my words and her expression turned even uglier. How could that bookworm have a girlfriend? Besides, he's famous for avoiding girls. "I'm not talking to you anymore. I want to go home with Dong-yu." I couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him and rushed out of the door. He relentlessly chased after me. In the midst of our tussle, I heard Dong-yu's surprised voice in the corridor. "Xiachuan?" As soon as I heard his voice, I turned around and saw him standing in the corridor with his school bag on his back. His back was straight. Immediately, as if I'd been waiting for help, I turned around and ran towards him. "Dong-yu." I threw myself on top of him and hugged him. Behind me, the two of them gasped. I didn't even have to think to know how shocked Suchi and the girl were. I tugged at Dong-yu's sleeve and whispered, "Just tell them you're my boyfriend." Dong-yu looked at me blankly and then at the two people behind me. He was even more baffled. "What's wrong?" I took his arm and said, "I told them you're my boyfriend, but they didn't believe me." Dong-yu's face darkened and he whispered to me, "Xiachuan, don't mess around." "I'm not messing around." I couldn't wait to get away from Suchi, the jinx. I tugged at Dong-yu's sleeve and said, "Let's go home." With that, I hugged his arm and walked towards the school garage. When we got home, Dong-yu pulled me into the study and closed the door. He asked me sternly, "What's going on? Why are you with Suchi?" Feeling wronged, I asked, Why are you so fierce?" It was rare for Dong-yu to give me such an expression. He was always so serious. He also realized that he had been too agitated. After calming himself down, he said, "In the future, keep your distance from Suchi, understand?" "Oh, I don't think so." Even if he didn't say anything, I would still keep a distance from him. But what I didn't know was that the reason Dong-yu wanted me to keep my distance from Suchi was because Suchi had a bad reputation. Smoking, drinking, fighting, looking for trouble. Suchi came from a wealthy family, so to him, going to school was just a necessary part of life. He didn't need to rely on studying to change his fate. In addition, his studies were not bad. Therefore, he spent most of his time skipping classes. Chapter 3096. At the time, Suchi had many girls chasing after him. Rumor had it that he changed girlfriends every month and was famous for being a playboy. It was also said that Suchi often went to bars, KTVs, and other entertainment venues. His parents didn't care about him, and the teachers in school couldn't do anything about him. That girl was one of his girlfriends. Seeing that I agreed so quickly, Dong-yu's anger dissipated. He immediately added, "Also, don't come to school to wait for me." "Why? You can take the bus back yourself. Although it's year 1 now, school ends very late. You don't have to wait for me and delay your homework." I was unhappy to hear that. "No. I want to go home with you." "Xiachuan, be good. The bus is too crowded." While I was complaining, Dad knocked on the door. "Dinner is ready. Come out and eat." That was the end of the topic. The next day, as usual, I waited for him to finish school and then we went home together. I also didn't bump into Suchi again. Until one day, as I walked out of the school gate with my bag on my back, I bumped into the girl who had bumped into me and Suchi in the infirmary that day. She seemed to have been waiting for me for a long time. As soon as I walked out of the school gate, I saw her walking towards me with precision and stopping in front of me. "Your name is Xiachuan, right?" I stared at her in confusion. "What?" There were 2 very tall girls standing behind her, and they looked very aggressive. "Come here." She tugged at the strap of my bag and led me to the corner of the school gate. She pushed me against the wall and sneered. "I'm warning you, stay away from Suchi. Don't think that just because Suchi wants to pursue you, he really likes you. It's just a spur-of-the-moment thing that he wants to do. I'll keep my distance from him even if you don't warn me." "Did you know that Suchi and Dong-yu had a fight?" She suddenly questioned me. At her question, I suddenly remembered that when I came back from school last night, There were some bruises on Dongyu's knuckles. When I asked, he only said that he accidentally bumped into them. What happened? What else could it be? Because of you. That guy, Su-chi, didn't believe that you were Eun Dongyu's girlfriend. He found Eun Dongyu and said that he wanted to woo you. I don't know what the two of them said, but they got into a fight and almost got penalized. Eun Dongyu's grades were good and the school valued him highly. Hence, they turned a blind eye to this incident and merely gave him a verbal warning. Eun Dongyu, on the other hand, did not record any punishment. For the sake of justice, he only gave Su-chi a verbal warning. I was getting more and more confused. What does that have to do with me? You are Eun Dongyu's sister, aren't you? When Su-chi went to look for Eun Dongyu yesterday, he said so himself. I was stunned. For some reason, Dongyu's quick clarification of our relationship made me inexplicably angry and unhappy. Why is he so eager to draw a line between us? With this conflicted mood, my tone also became angry. You came to find me for this? I sized her up and said suspiciously, Don't tell me you like Su-chi? I'm Su-chi's girlfriend. She raised her head and said this with a sense of nobility that could not be sullied. Chapter 3097. These words probably pierced her heart. Perhaps I was right, but she immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation and rushed over to pull my hair. But why didn't she think about it? I'd been hanging out with boys since I was young. I wasn't afraid of fighting. She pulled my hair, and I punched her in the face. When the two girls behind her saw this, they rushed up as well. The three of them fought me together. However, I didn't back down at all. I wrestled with them, and they tore at my clothes. Just then, footsteps rushed over and a pair of hands separated us. The next second, I saw Su-chi glaring at them angrily and shielding me behind him. What are you doing? Su-chi, why are you here? When the girl saw him, she questioned him with an aggrieved expression. Don't tell me you've really fallen for her. Su-chi, I'm your girlfriend. Su-chi turned around and glanced at me. When he turned back, his tone was cold. You used to be, but not anymore. What do you mean? I mean it literally. Don't you understand? Su-chi. Tears welled up in her eyes and she glared at me before looking at him. So, you're breaking up with me for her, right? Su-chi said, back then, you were the one who chased me while crying. I took pity on you so I agreed. It was just a perfunctory thing. You don't have to take it seriously. These words were heartbreaking for a girl who was still in puberty and had ignorant fantasies about love. Are you sure you want to break up with me? She pointed at me. Because of her? Yuan Jing, stop pestering me. Do you know that what you're doing makes me feel disgusted? He warned again. Also, I'm warning you, don't make trouble for her again. When Yuan Jing heard this, she clenched her fists and wiped away her tears. Then, she turned around and ran away. The two girls behind her chased after her in a panic. The three of them gradually disappeared into the distance. I immediately shook off his hand with an awkward expression. Don't touch me, okay? You make it sound like we're very close. Su-chi turned around and looked at me with a smile. In Shachuan. I'll remember your name. Su-chi approached me, the expression on his face so gentle that it was a little unfamiliar. Let's date. Can you be my girlfriend? Why should I be your girlfriend? Because I like you. I didn't understand why it was so easy for him to say the words, I like you, which sounded so hard for me to say. It was so relaxed that I felt that his so-called love was definitely not very heavy. I pretended I didn't hear anything and turned to leave. He caught up with me and walked side by side with me. He even reached out and took my bag from my hands, as if he was trying to please me. I extended my hand to snatch it from him, but he dodged and smiled brightly. Your backpack is so heavy. Let me help you carry it. I don't need your kindness. I tried to snatch it again, but he grabbed my hand and held it tightly. Then, he smiled brightly at me. As if I had touched a hot potato, I shook off his hand. He was clearly touching my hand, but my face felt hot as if it had been scalded. I turned my head and said, It's getting late. I'm going home. He immediately leaned over. I'll take you home. Chapter 3098. Su-chi pursed his lips but did not relent. I like following you around. I couldn't stand it. It was only our second time meeting, but he seemed to be very familiar with me. I flew into a rage out of humiliation and asked him back, "What do you want?" Suchi was surprised for a moment, but he still smiled, revealing his snow-white teeth. "Can't you tell that I'm chasing you?" My heart skipped a beat. Perhaps it was because his smile was too dazzling, but I quickly turned my head and said, "My mother doesn't allow me to date at such a young age." "You're already so old. Does your mother still care about you?" I ignored him and reached for my bag. Suchi avoided me again and said, "I'll take you home." "No." "Yes." "No." "Yes." Suchi threatened. "Otherwise, I'll tell the girls in your class that you like me." "Who likes you?" "You." I didn't know he was such a scoundrel, but I was really afraid that he would tell the people in my class that he liked me. So I could only say, "Then you can't take me to the door. At most, you can take me to the bridge." "Okay." "Then give me back my bag." Suchi didn't insist and returned the bag to me. I took it, put it on my back, and immediately ran home. "Hey, Enchanting!" He realized that he had been tricked and shouted angrily behind me. I didn't look back, as if he was some kind of monster. I ran as fast as I could until I reached the bridgehead. I looked back and saw that I had shaken him off, so I stopped running. I panted as I walked back home. I thought that he would give up. Unexpectedly, Suchi was even more persistent than I had imagined. Unexpectedly, I met him again at the gate the next day after class. He was sitting on a bicycle. When he saw me, he got off and pushed the bicycle in front of me. He snorted coldly. "Little liar." I looked at him guiltily and lowered my head. I couldn't help but wonder if he had waited for me at the school gate on his bicycle today just to make it easier for him to chase after me. "Don't follow me anymore. I'm going home." I turned around and left. He caught up with me and tugged at my sleeve. "Don't. It's still early. I'll treat you to some fun." "I don't want to. If I don't go home, my mother will be worried." Using your mother as a shield again. He grabbed the strap of my bag and smiled. "Let's go. I'll take you to a fun place." Seeing that I couldn't avoid it this time, I got in the car. I thought that with his persistence, he would definitely follow me to my doorstep. Sitting on the back seat, I was worried about how to get rid of this annoying guy. When I came back to my senses, I found the bike parked at a luxurious place. At the door stood a few young students. 2 of them looked like gangsters. When they saw Suchi, they greeted him respectfully. "Brother Suchi, you're here." "Skating rink." I looked at the lighted sign and was startled. Suchi asked me, "Have you ever skated?" I shook my head. To me, places like skating rinks, internet cafes, and karaoke rooms are all bad places. Whether it's parents or teachers, they are all forbidden from entering those places. Chapter 3099. I wasn't an obedient child, but I avoided such places. Hence, I was particularly resistant to entering such places. I immediately said, "I don't like skating. I'd better go home." "No." He put his arm around my shoulder and smiled. "Skating is fun. You'll want to do it a second time after you've done it once. I haven't finished my homework yet. If I'm late, I won't be able to finish it in time." He snatched my bag and threw it to a few high school students behind him. He instructed, "Help her finish her homework." "Wait." I stopped him. "If the handwriting is different, the teacher will be able to tell. I'll get them to write it in pencil. When you go back, erase and rewrite according to the answers. It'll be quick." "But." "No buts. I'll treat you to a drink. Just treat it as an apology from last time." "An apology?" "Yes." As Suchi spoke, he tapped his lips suggestively and smiled meaningfully. "Don't tell me that last time was your first kiss?" When I heard this, my face heated up. I turned away from him. He leaned in again and asked in a low voice, "Am I the first boy to kiss you?" I immediately said, "No." His expression immediately changed. "No." Then he said resentfully, "Seeing your excited reaction, I thought it was your first kiss." I said, "My first kiss was long gone." Suchi was interested and asked, "Then who did you give your first kiss to?" "My brother." "Your brother?" "Yes." I nodded and said, "Don't you?" Suchi immediately smiled disapprovingly. "That doesn't count." I muttered curiously, "Why doesn't it count?" He's your brother, so it doesn't count. The first kiss is for someone of the opposite sex other than family. How can your brother count? When I heard this, I became even more unhappy. Su-Chi's smile deepened. Does that mean I was your first kiss? I said angrily, if you keep talking nonsense, I'll really go home. All right. Su-Chi raised his hands in surrender. I was wrong, Missy. Let's go, I'll teach you how to skate. But even so, the corner of his mouth still held a secret smile, as if he was sure that it was my first kiss with him, and his mood was so bright. I ignored him and raised my head to look at the neon sign. For some reason, I didn't refuse and let him lead me in. I was quite curious about ice skating. I didn't know what kind of magical place the ice skating rink was. It made many parents' faces change when they talked about it. When they entered the skating rink, many people were wearing ice skates and playing freely on the field. Sometimes, there would be people lining up and grabbing the clothes of the people in front of them, forming a long line. I glanced around and saw a lot of guys and girls with strange hairstyles and strange clothes. Especially those ripped jeans, baggy pant legs, the clothes that hung down to his shoulders, and his hairstyle that was dyed in all sorts of colors. His weird aesthetic made people feel uncomfortable just by looking at him. Su-Chi hugged me and bought the tickets. Then, he changed into his ice skates. I actually found it novel. It seemed to be quite fun. Chapter 3100. Su-Chi hugged me, bought the tickets, and then changed into his skates. I actually found it novel. It seemed to be quite fun. When I was young, I was always filled with a desire to explore the unknown. I wanted to get close to it, to get to the bottom of it, to figure out what was going on, and to be immersed in it. But it often brought about scars. My parents always said that we, the younger generation, would not give up until we hit a brick wall. But the truth was that there were some things that one might not give up on even if they hit a brick wall. Even if one was covered in injuries, one had to continue down this path. For example, when it came to ice skating, one would often end up covered in injuries in the beginning. Ah! Bam! I lost count of the number of times I slipped and fell to the ground. Su-Chi skated in front of me, smiled at me, and reached out his hand to me. I looked at the pulley under his feet, not sure if he would also fall if he pulled me. However, Su-Chi saw my worry and said confidently, "Don't worry. I'm very skilled. I won't fall." Only then did I extend my hand to him skeptically. He grabbed my hand and pulled me to my feet. Su-Chi pulled me forward, but I didn't dare. After being on the ice for so long, it was difficult for me to even walk. Hence, I grabbed the railing tightly and refused to walk with him. However, he didn't see my actions. Hence, with the two forces resisting each other, I lost my balance and fell backward. Almost subconsciously, I grabbed his hand tightly. He was caught off guard. When he turned around, he lost his balance because of me. With a bang, I fell to the ground. He also fell on top of me. Fortunately, he reacted in time. Afraid of crushing me, he supported himself with both hands. Because of the impact, the back of my head hurt a lot. I complained in annoyance. When I opened my eyes, I was met with a pair of clear eyes. He stared at me. At such a close distance, his breath was on my face. For a moment, I didn't dare to breathe because I felt that if I breathed, what entered my lungs would be his gentle breath. A few of his friends skated over. When they saw this scene, they were overjoyed. Su-Chi, you're really something. Su-Chi is getting better and better at picking up girls. Su-Chi obviously didn't hear what they were saying. He looked at me intently, but I heard it. In my embarrassment, I pushed him. Hey, did you do it on purpose? Get up, I complained. You're so heavy. Oh. Su-Chi immediately got up and pulled me up. I shook off his hand, tidied my clothes, and stood aside with a red face. They were still laughing. Su-Chi turned around and glared at them. If you keep laughing, I'll teach you a lesson. All right. Stop messing around. The few of them laughed and dispersed. Su-Chi looked at me and asked, "Are you okay?" I ignored him. He smiled and said, "Do you know how to skate?" I shook my head blankly. He said, "The biggest trick of ice skating is not to be afraid of falling." I was stunned. Ha! Don't be afraid of falling? But it would hurt if she fell. Chapter 3101. How will you learn if it doesn't hurt? More importantly, you have to be bold. Don't be afraid. You'll never learn to walk with small steps while holding onto the railing. With that, he reached out his hand to me. Come, give me your hand. I looked at him warily. What are you doing? Give me your hand. I hesitated for a few seconds. Then, I reached out my hand timidly. He grabbed my hand and pulled me to him. I swayed as he pulled me to him. My body was so stiff that I didn't dare to move an inch. Relax. He looked at me and laughed. You're usually quite fierce. You act like you're the biggest and aren't afraid of anything. Why are you so timid now that you're on roller skates? I snorted coldly but didn't say anything. He faced me, holding my hand as he skated backwards. I was dumbfounded and my eyes went straight. Won't you fall if you skate backwards? Of course not. He was smug, as if it was rare for him to have something to show off. Am I very good? I focused all my attention on the ground beneath my feet. I felt like I was being dragged by him like a trolley. You can try moving your feet while maintaining your balance. I shook my head like a broken drum. Suchi said, don't be afraid of falling. Even if you fall, I'll be with you. As he said that, I grew a little bolder. With him holding my hand, I could actually stagger forward. I got the hang of it a little. In the end, I was able to skate slightly smoothly under his lead. However, the price of learning to skate was still very expensive. My knees were bruised from the fall. When I walked out of the skating rink, I felt as if my knees had cracked. I grimaced in pain. Suchi asked me, is it serious? Does it hurt a lot? With that, he squatted down to check on the situation. I immediately dodged and said guiltily, it's nothing. It's getting late. Take me home. Suchi smiled and stared at my face for a long time. Suddenly he said, so you can be shy too? What do you mean? Nothing. Suchi gave her a look. Get in the car, I'll take you home. I sat in the back seat unwillingly. His steps were a little shaky, and I immediately grabbed the corner of his shirt nervously. He said, if you're scared you can hug me. No way. Suchi snorted and said disapprovingly, how many girls want to sit in the back seat of my car? They don't even have the chance. I don't care. All right, eldest miss. I was the one who begged you to take my car. Suki rode a little faster, and the bike sped along the dark road. I stared at the wheels under my feet, spinning fast. The breeze gently lifted the corner of his clothes. I saw the moonlight and the shadows of the lamps intertwined and fell on his body. His back blocked the bleak night wind for me, and I didn't feel so cold anymore. When I arrived downstairs, I started to feel nervous. It was the first time I had returned home so late. I didn't know what to say when I got home. Suchi stuffed his bag into my arms and said, I've done my homework. Remember to erase and rewrite it when you get home. How's the accuracy? It can't be all wrong, right? You're kidding. Junior high school homework is very simple. Just scribble. Suchi looked at me and asked, do you want me to take you upstairs? Chapter 3102. There's no need. I stared at him and urged, hurry up and go home. Suchi nodded, as if he still wanted to say something. I was suddenly a little afraid that he would say something that would make me feel awkward. I quickly stopped him. Be careful on the road. Do you have a cell phone? He suddenly asked. I shook my head and frowned. Why are you asking about my cell phone? A cell phone was a luxury item for us in middle school. Usually, those who brought a cell phone to school were from wealthy families. Otherwise, they would only be equipped with one in high school. I shook my head and said, no. Suchi didn't persist. He waved his hand casually and left. I turned around and was about to go upstairs when I saw a slender figure on a small stone bench downstairs under the street lamp. I took a closer look and was shocked. Dongyu. I didn't know how long he had been sitting there and waiting. He must have seen Suchi send me back just now. I suddenly felt a little guilty. Dongyu slowly stood up and walked towards me. There was a hint of anger and sullenness in his eyes. He looked down at me and then at the bag in my arms. He asked in a low voice, you're back so late. Where did you go? I looked at him and hesitated. After thinking for a long time I lied. I went to my classmate's house for tuition. Classmate. Dongyu's expression darkened. So, why were you with Suchi? Huh. I was even more flustered. Brother, you saw everything? Usually, I would call him by his name. Only when I made a mistake and angered him would I carefully call him brother. Did you know? Dongyu suddenly said, when you lie you don't dare to look at me. I lowered my head, feeling a little embarrassed. I didn't mean to lie to you. I was just afraid that you'd be worried. I admit that I really don't know how to lie. The most perfect lie in my life was when I cried to him one day and told him, Dongyu, I don't love you anymore. I've let go. Dongyu couldn't bear to blame me too much. I knew that as long as I showed such an expression, he would definitely not pursue the matter. Since you know that I will be worried, then don't come home so late next time. He lowered his head and his gaze suddenly landed on my knee. There was a tinge of heartache in his eyes. He immediately squatted down and touched the bruise with his fingertips. He furrowed his beautiful eyebrows and asked, what happened? I fell. He looked up. You fell? How did you fall? I said, I accidentally tripped on a rock. Dongyu was so angry that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He poked my head hard and said, you can even fall while walking? Are your eyes growing on top of your head? When I heard him say that, I knew he couldn't bear to be angry with me. I smiled and hugged his arm, burrowing into his embrace. Brother, I was wrong. Dongyu took the opportunity to hug me. He sounded helpless and couldn't bear to say anything more. He only said calmly, do you know how worried I am? He couldn't reach me, and I didn't have a phone, so he stayed downstairs and waited for me. I whispered, I won't do it again. There will be a next time? No more, no more. There will be no next time. Remember, don't come home late. Chapter 3103. I took his hand and was about to follow him upstairs when I suddenly asked nervously, where's Mom and Dad? They're asleep. Then? I hesitated for a moment, not daring to go upstairs. Will they scold me? They must be angry that I'm home so late. I told them that you were tutoring at your classmate's house, but they didn't say much. Brother, you're amazing. Dongyu glared at me, and I didn't dare to make a sound. I followed him upstairs and entered my room. I had just taken out my exercise book when he checked it for me as usual. I refused, but he moved quickly. He picked up the exercise book and flipped through it, only to find that there was something fishy about it. He had always been observant. Sensing that there was something wrong with the handwriting, he hit me on the head with the exercise book. Who helped you with this homework? Suchi's friend. Dongyu was stunned and made a move to hit me with the exercise book. I shrunk my shoulders and looked timid. He was both angry and amused. Then, he erased all the answers on the exercise book with an eraser. I exclaimed and quickly reached out to snatch the eraser from him. Brother, what are you doing? Redo it. Use your own brain. Dongyu stared at me. The monthly exam is coming up. Do you know how to do these questions? I know. Then do it for me. But, it's already so late. I'm sleepy. I'll accompany you. Dongyu tidied up my exercise book and took out a book. After flipping through it casually, he had a rough idea of what to do. I had no choice but to work through the night and finish all my homework. It wasn't until 1 in the morning that I climbed into bed. After taking a shower, Dongyu entered my room. Seeing that I was already lying on the bed, unable to open my eyes, he gave me a carton of milk. Then, he glanced at my unpacked bag on the table and silently helped me tidy it up. When he walked out of the room, my eyelids couldn't hold on any longer. The moment the door closed, I fell asleep. The next day after school, Suchi was waiting for me at the school gate again. I didn't know if this had anything to do with boys' desire to conquer during puberty, but at the time, I thought that such persistence definitely didn't involve much liking. Every day after school, he would ride his bicycle and wait for me at the school gate. I usually ignored him, turned around, and walked in the direction of home. He would often ride his bicycle and follow behind me. Even if I didn't communicate with him at all, he still seemed to enjoy it. With him following me, I naturally couldn't wait for Dongyu to go home together. After all, if he saw me with Suchi, I wouldn't be able to explain myself no matter how many times I tried. It's not like I didn't know what kind of guy Suki was. Rumor had it that he was a particularly dandy child. In addition to his dark history of fighting, smoking and drinking, he also had a lot of criminal records. Suchi's reputation was so great that even though we were separated by a street, rumors about him had spread like wildfire in my school. I heard that he has dated many girls. Some of them were pursued by him on his own accord, while others were destined to pursue him. All in all, there should be enough for a class, right? Chapter 3104. In the past, Suchi secretly drove his father's car out. It was a Bentley. I heard it cost a few million each. He didn't have a driver's license, and his car and person were detained by the traffic police. In the end, it was his father who took him back. Suchi's family is very rich. His parents are very prestigious entrepreneurs in the city. I heard that he lives in a mansion from Shuanglong's original novel. It's more than 1,000 square meters in size and has 2 swimming pools. The back garden is bigger than a football field. My impression of him was even worse. But no matter how much I tried to avoid him, I seem to have underestimated his patience. Once a young boy developed a strong interest in something, he would probably become very passionate about it. He would do it regardless of anyone's opinion. He liked to play basketball and worked hard at it. He chased after a girl and worked hard at it. They didn't need to think about whether it would succeed or fail. Perhaps they just enjoyed the joy of the process, including the matter of love. When I grew up, I used to think that if we, who had entered society and gradually learned to deal with things smoothly, who had learned to give up on what we couldn't get, and who didn't have to be so persistent, whether it was Suchi or me, would we have been like moths to a flame, chasing after the lighthouse in our hearts without care for our own safety. Just like how I liked Dongyu, how could Suchi's love for me not go its own way? When we were young, adults laughed at us for being too naive and simple. We never thought much of it. We thought we were mature. We were unruly, unwilling, vigorous, rebellious. We thought that our society was the real society. Adults were the stupid ones. But when I grew up and looked back, I suddenly realized that I was really naive and simple when I was young. Since I was young, I thought that if I liked someone, I had to be fearless. But after I grew up, I found it difficult to muster up the courage to love. It was precisely because I was too rational that I knew very well that if I fell deeply in love, I would be hurt again and again. I always say now, don't be too obsessed with love. It doesn't bring any benefits. Only a few people are happy, and most of them suffer the pain of being lost. Persevering again and again, until finally giving up reluctantly. It's unforgettable. Love, half of it is enough. It's not all there is to life. However, people may say nice things, but they may not necessarily do well. At most, I'm just trying to show off. Even I can't get out of this predicament. It's like being trapped in a foggy swamp. At that time, Suchi was probably like me, fearless when it came to love. Perhaps it was his persistence that finally moved me. When he handed me a cornetto, I took it and said, "Thank you." I didn't notice how flattered he looked. "You're finally willing to talk to me?" I smiled. I was willing to pay attention to him because I thought he was too silly. He followed me around like a shadow every day. Ever since I was young, I was the only one who followed Dongyu around. One day, there was also someone who followed behind me like I did. It seemed that because of this, I didn't hate his face that much anymore. It's not bad to have someone accompany me home. Suchi smiled. I glanced at him and couldn't help but say, "You don't seem as bad as the rumors say." Chapter 3105. Rumors. Suchi's interest was piqued. What rumors? Rumors about you. Some people say that you skip class, smoke, drink, get into fights, and that a girl once had an abortion for you. Are these all true? When Suchi heard this, he laughed mockingly. Oh, that's all. I thought it was something else. Then are these rumors true? Half-truths. Half-truths. I was even more confused. I didn't understand what he meant. It's either true or false. What do you mean by half-truths? Sometimes what you see may not be true. What he heard with his ears might not necessarily be true. For example, I smoke, I drink, and I get into fights. These are all true. But there are rumors that a girl once had an abortion for me. I accompanied a girl to have an abortion, but I wasn't the one who got her pregnant. If it wasn't you, who was it? Well, I can't tell you. Suchi smiled. I promised to keep it a secret. Petty, I muttered. You have so many secrets. Who doesn't have secrets? If you really want to know, why don't we trade? Su-Chi rode around to stand in front of me and sized me up. You should have a little secret too. You tell me your secret, and I'll tell you mine. That's only fair. I looked at him seriously. After a while, I smiled at him and pretended to be mysterious. I can't tell you. Tisk. Su-Chi looked indifferent. Turning around, I bit my lip and clutched my chest, my heart racing. I returned home with a heavy heart. When I pushed open the door to the study, I saw that Dongyu's books were still neatly arranged on his desk. Obviously, he hadn't returned home from school yet. I stood there for a long time, recalling Su-Chi's words. Just as he said, everyone has an unspeakable secret in their hearts. And my unspeakable secret was only related to Dongyu. I liked him. Since when did she realize that her feelings for him were not ordinary? Was it when he watched me bathe when I was being bullied, and then went to find that person angrily to denounce him? Or was it when I saw the other children flocking around him, and I longed for him to belong to me alone? Was it when Menglan said that Dongyu and I couldn't be together? Or was it when I saw him take out so many gifts from the table and throw them all into the trash can, and I felt incomparably happy in my heart? No one knew. From the moment I was born, my feelings for Dongyu were different from everyone else's. It wasn't the closeness of a family member, nor was it the love of a lover. Instead, in this world, other than him, I could become indifferent to anyone else. Could this be considered a form of love? I was a little confused about this. I wanted to understand, but I wasn't in a hurry to understand. He always felt that once some things were made clear, it would become difficult to make a choice. This kind of strange feeling became more and more perplexing after a random incident. I remember once, during the annual sports meet of First High School, I snuck into the school to play. I found Dongyu's classroom with familiarity. As soon as I walked in, I saw a girl standing sneakily in front of Dongyu's desk. She was holding an envelope in her hand, as if she was going to stuff it in. Chapter 3106. The girl was startled by my sudden action. She patted her chest and turned to look at me with a baffled expression. "Who are you?" she muttered, blushing as she reached out to snatch the envelope from my hand. I dodged her and stubbornly asked, "Tell me, what is this?" "Why should I tell you? This is mine. Give it back to me." She reached out to snatch it from me. I held the envelope behind my back, almost glaring at her with a hostile look. "This is a love letter, isn't it?" A hint of embarrassment appeared on her face as she looked at me awkwardly. Then she asked in dissatisfaction, "Who are you? Who are you to control me?" "I don't care who you are, and you don't have to care who I am. Don't send such things over in the future." With that, I grabbed the envelope by the waist and tore it into pieces. She stared at me with her mouth agape. I thought that this love letter must have taken a lot of effort, but in my hands, it had turned into a pile of debris. One could imagine how angry she was that her eyes were red with anger. Footsteps came from outside the door. Dongyu and a few boys from his class returned to the classroom. When I saw him, I felt inexplicably at a loss. I felt like I had been caught red-handed. Just now, in a moment of impulse, I didn't care about anything else and did what I did. After calming down, I felt that I had indeed gone overboard. However, I couldn't control my hand. I just felt that the letter should have been torn into pieces. When the girl saw Dongyu, her eyes turned even redder. She burst into tears, feeling wronged and helpless. Dongyu walked over and looked at me, then at her. His face was filled with confusion. The boys behind him were also confused. "What's going on?" he asked with concern in a gentle tone. However, subconsciously, he walked up to me. From the details, I knew that he was wholeheartedly protecting me. "Dongyu, who is she?" The girl pointed at me and complained, "She tore up the thing I gave you for no reason." Dongyu frowned and turned to look at me. His tone was low. "Shachuan, why are you causing trouble again?" "Brother," I whispered, "I don't like other girls sending you love letters. Didn't Mom say that we shouldn't fall in love?" Dongyu was stunned for a few seconds. He had always been smart, so he immediately realized what had happened. I saw him bend down and pick up a few pieces from the ground. He put them together, a helpless expression on his face. He looked up and glanced at the girl. "Love letter? The girl blushed and was a little embarrassed, but she still nodded. Yeah. You were the one who gave me that box of chocolates, right? Dongyu asked again. Hearing his question, she mustered up her courage and said, Dongyu, I like. As if he knew what she was going to say, Dongyu interrupted her bluntly and said lightly, Don't give me these things anymore. As he spoke, he took out a box of chocolates from the table. It was hot and the chocolate had melted. I didn't see him bring the chocolates home. It turned out that he had left them on his desk in the classroom. I kept forgetting to deal with this box of chocolates. Here you go. Chapter 3107. Aren't you going to hear me out? Since they had already spoken face to face, she mustered up her courage and said, Dongyu, I just transferred to First High School. I've liked you since the first time I saw you at the opening ceremony. I was the one who gave you the chocolates and the greeting cards. I didn't have the courage to confess to you. I also know that perhaps I'm overthinking and causing you trouble, but these are all my intentions. Must you reject them? Dongyu was a very soft-hearted person. At least, every time I got into trouble and he was angry with me, I would coax him and beg for mercy. No matter how angry he was, it would quickly dissipate. However, this was also the first time I realized that Dongyu wasn't soft-hearted. Although the girl looked like she was about to cry, his face remained cold. Don't cry, and don't feel aggrieved. I know you like me, but I have no obligation to respond to you. The girl probably didn't expect his words to be so straightforward and cruel. Now that there were other people present, she felt embarrassed. She didn't even remember to take the chocolates. She turned around and rushed out of the classroom. Only then did a few boys come to life. They walked up to him and teased, Dongyu, do you have to hurt her like this? That's right. That girl's eyes are swollen. Dongyu glanced at them and said lightly, Since you can't give her any response, don't give her any hope. When I heard this, I couldn't help but be startled. On the way home, he rode his bike. I wrapped my arms around his waist and suddenly asked curiously, Dongyu, do you often receive love letters? No. I remember when we were in primary school, many girls liked you. I hugged him tightly and said uneasily, Will you have a girl you like in the future? As soon as I said that, I noticed that his back stiffened. Then, I heard him ask in a deep voice, Do you have someone you like? No. I said immediately. I don't like anyone except you. That's just for now. Dongyu smiled. When you grow up, you'll have a boy you like. You'll get to know each other, fall in love with each other, and then spend the rest of your life with each other. That's not it. I said disdainfully, I like Dongyu the most. I don't like anyone else. At this point, he seemed to be avoiding the topic. What do you want to eat tonight? Seeing that he had skipped this topic, I didn't insist on it and changed the topic to something else. However, his words still made me uneasy. Would he have a girl he liked in the future? From knowing each other to loving each other, to staying together for the rest of their lives? Then, what about me? When that time comes, where will my position be? That night, he fell asleep. I crept into his room and sat by his bed, looking at his sleeping face. Ever since he was young, the closest person to him was me. Only the heavens knew how many people envied this special position. But when I think that one day, this position will be replaced by another girl, I feel a little unwilling. I lay down beside him, and as I hugged him, a bold thought popped into my head. Could I like him? As soon as this thought occurred to me, my whole body tensed up. The word, like, was too familiar. However, the word, love, was a little unfamiliar to him. Chapter 3108. I liked him, but I didn't know if this was love. Did it have anything to do with sex between men and women? My relationship with Su Qi gradually grew closer. Perhaps, deep down, I hoped that someone would gradually replace Dongyu. I couldn't rely on him too much. I thought that perhaps my world was too small, so much so that other than my family, there was only him. I couldn't touch the outside world. Hence, all my obsessions were only related to him. Then, what about trying to touch others? Xiachuan. Every time school ended, Su Qi's handsome smiling face would appear in front of me on time. I always used to put my bag in his basket, then get into his back seat and let him drive me home. But that day, I flunked my exam and was in a bad mood after being scolded. I was frowning at the thought of not knowing how to explain myself when I got home. Tomorrow is Saturday. You don't have to rush home today, do you? Come and have fun with me. It's getting late. I'm going home. I hugged my exam papers and turned around to leave. I walked past him coldly and headed home. Suchi also noticed that something was wrong with my expression. He caught up with me on his bike and asked, "What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood?" I glared at him, wanting to cry. Some people are born with a talent for reading, such as Dongyu and Suchi. Even if they don't pay much attention in class, they can still learn a lot of homework by flipping through the books. But I don't seem to be such a genius. Hence, in the monthly exam a few days later, I did my best to rank among the top few in class and failed 3 out of 5 subjects. I was just in the bottom few. The bottom few students had to be announced to the whole class. I was dragged to the podium in the spotlight and was criticized along with the other students who had failed the exam. We returned to our seats with our tails between our legs. I was so ashamed that I almost shed tears. Hence, when I saw Suchi's bright smile at the school gate, I was in no mood to talk to him. Suchi walked over and took the exam paper from my arms when I wasn't paying attention. I took a closer look and saw the huge 58 on it. It was extremely glaring. "You only scored 58 in math?" I said angrily. "What does it have to do with you? Give it back to me." Suchi dodged and switched to the language paper. 67 marks? It's so easy to memorize junior high language. Yet you only got such a low score? Suchi! I stomped my feet, my face turning even redder. Suchi took the bag from me and said, "Get in the car." "Where to?" "To give you extra lessons." Suchi added, "I've made an appointment with Dongyu." I was stunned for a moment. When I heard that Dongyu was there, I got into his car. Ever since I came home late that time, I didn't expect Dongyu and Suchi to become friends. I guess Dongyu probably felt that since he couldn't chase Suchi away from me, then becoming friends with him was a form of protection in disguise. The two of them had similar personalities. One was as passionate as fire, while the other was as calm as ice. They usually played basketball together after class, so they got along pretty well. After I failed the monthly exam, Dongyu and Suchi took turns tutoring me. Initially, the tutoring location was set up in the library. However, for some reason, whenever Dongyu and Suchi appeared together, the library would become noisy. Chapter 3109. Being sandwiched between the two school hunks of E High School, I felt like there were many pairs of eyes staring at me from behind. Hence, he decided to tutor me at Suchi's house. The first time I went to Suchi's house, it was in a high-end apartment next to E High School. It was more than 160 square meters. At that time, the average price of land was more than 30,000 yuan. Every inch of land was worth gold. Such an apartment was considered a mansion. It was such a big apartment, but he lived alone. Usually, the nanny would cook for him and take care of his daily life. Suchi preferred silence, so other than the fixed cleaning time, he was the only one at home. He said that his parents were busy with their business and were rarely at home, so he lived alone. His living room was very big, more than 50 square meters. At that time, all kinds of game consoles were still rare, but it was commonplace in his house. There were all kinds of games. While I was revising, Dongyu and Suchi were playing games with the game controllers. I watched from the side, envious. The taste of tutoring was especially boring. During that period, I was cut off from eating, drinking, and having fun. I remembered that at that time, there was a Japanese-themed haunted house that opened at Ocean Department Store. Business was in full swing and its reputation was exceptionally good. Many young students sought excitement. After a trip to the haunted house, they said that they hadn't had enough. It was very interesting, scary, and exciting. They highly recommended it and even formed cliques. I was afraid of ghosts, but I was very curious about ghosts and gods. Since I was young, I liked to drag Dongyu to watch ghost movies. Hence, I suggested that we go to the haunted house together. However, Dongyu countered, "If you get into the top 10 in the next monthly exam, I'll take you there." Suchi added, "As long as you do well, I'll treat you." I withered. "What if I don't do well?" Dongyu said coldly. "Then there's no chance." I bit the end of my pen. My ambition was finally ignited, and I worked even harder in my tutoring. However, how should I put it? With ambition comes motivation. After the results of the mid-semester monthly exam, although I wasn't close to the top 10, I was 0.5 points behind the 10th place. Dongyu wasn't unreasonable. On the weekend, I made an appointment with Su-chi to go to the haunted house together. After buying the tickets, I was a little timid and didn't dare to go in. Seeing my timid look, Su-chi couldn't help but laugh at me. You were the one who said you wanted to come and have fun. In the end, you hid at the door and didn't dare to enter. What's the meaning of this? Dongyu said, she's afraid. She's especially afraid of ghosts. Su-chi said, you dare to challenge a haunted house when you're afraid of ghosts? I couldn't take it lying down. Who said I was scared? The slogan was loud and clear, but I still didn't dare to step in. Su-chi ran out of patience and walked over to take my hand. I flinched and avoided his hand. I snorted and said, I'm here. Don't walk in front. Then I'll have you walk in the middle. As Dongyu spoke, he took my hand and led the way. For some reason, the moment he held my hand, I felt that the pitch-black door, which was like an endless abyss, was no longer that terrifying. I mustered up my courage and followed him. Su-chi, who was behind him, was stunned for a few seconds. He only followed after the staff urged him. Chapter 31:10. As we passed by a hospital bed, a staff member with disheveled hair, dressed as Sadako, suddenly let out a sinister cry at me. I was so frightened that I hugged Dongyu's back tightly and shouted as I squeezed past him to move forward. Dongyu and Su-chi were calm. They probably knew that this was all fake and it was difficult for them to get into character. However, I screamed the entire time. When I walked out of the exit, I fell to the ground as if I had just survived a disaster. When I realized that I had escaped, I was still in a state of shock. Tears streamed down my face as I cried bitterly. Dongyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hugged my shoulders and patted my back, comforting me. All right. Don't be afraid anymore. You're not in there anymore and you're still crying? You're really something. His heart ached and he found it funny. Su-chi was convulsing with laughter at the side. He was probably amused by my crying face. Beside me, a girl in a staff uniform walked over and asked weakly, Are you a student of second high? I looked up and saw her looking at the uniform I was wearing. She nodded with tears in her eyes. Seeing my tears, she handed me a tissue and smiled helplessly. Is the haunted house that scary? Yes. I nodded. Then she said, My name is Han Xiao. I'm also a student of second high. I'm in year 1, class 9. What about you? When I heard this, I immediately forgot to cry. I said in surprise, You're in second high too? Han Xiao was the first and only close friend I had in my middle school life. Later, she found out that her uncle had invested in the haunted house. She would come here on weekends to work part-time while she was still studying. At that time, it wasn't unusual for underage children to work. Furthermore, it was her family's business, so she didn't have any qualms. From then on, Han Xiao and I became very good friends. We talked about everything and were very close. I often dragged her to the basketball court at First High after school to watch Dongyu and Su-chi play basketball. After that, we would go home together. We occupied the back seat of Dongyu and Su-chi's bicycle. Most of the time, I would sit in the back seat of Dongyu's car. He was sweaty and sticky. Even though I was sweating profusely, I didn't hesitate to hug him. Sitting in the back seat, he watched the sun set in the west. The sunset fell on his body through the mottled shadows of the trees, as if he was plated with gold. At that time, everything was so beautiful. During the first long holiday of middle school, we agreed to go to Fragrant Hill to play in the water. Fragrant Mountain was a very small mountain, but what was famous about it was not the mountain, but the huge lake beside the mountain. It was so clear that one could see the bottom. At that time, although clear lake water was common, there weren't many places where one could get close to water. The lake was connected to the shore, and the lake water overflowed the shore. I liked to walk on the shallow shore and watch the clear lake water submerge my ankles. It was so comfortable. At noon, they spread out a tablecloth by the shore and placed the snacks they brought on the tablecloth. Han Xiao seemed to be a little uncomfortable. Seeing that her face was a little pale, I asked a few questions with concern. She seemed a little awkward and a little shy. She only said that her stomach was not feeling well. But at that time, I didn't understand the process that girls had to go through during their puberty. Chapter 31:11. Brother. Brother. After a few syllables, another wave of pain hit me. I immediately sobered up and realized that it was Saturday and the school was closed. Dongyu had gone to school for class. High school was a heavy workload. As a top student in the top class, Dongyu would attend classes every Saturday and weekend morning. He was still in his second year of high school, but he was already working hard on the college entrance examination. Every year, the college entrance examination was a reshuffling of fate. If the college entrance examination went smoothly, it might mean that the future of one's life would be smooth sailing. At least for the high school students of that period, the college entrance examination was an extremely heavy word filled with hope and pain. There was no one at home. I sat up in bed, clutching my stomach. I moved my body and immediately realized that there was something strange about the bedsheets. I lifted the blanket with difficulty and moved my legs, only to realize that there was a faint red stain on the bedsheets. It was extremely eye-catching. Blood? Why was there blood? I was scared out of my wits. I didn't know what had happened to my body. I was fine last night. Why was I bleeding when I woke up? I couldn't figure out where the blood came from. Clutching my stomach, I rushed into the bathroom. When I took off my pants, I saw a bloody stain on them. My eyes widened as if I'd been struck by lightning. For a moment, blood cancer, leukemia. All sorts of terrifying words lingered in my mind. Don't tell me. I've contracted some kind of terminal illness. At the thought of this possibility, I fell onto the toilet. All the blood in my body flowed to the top of my head and I felt dizzy. What should I do? What should I do? I was anxious and restless. I felt suffocated at the thought that I might have contracted some kind of terminal illness. Thinking further, if I were to die from a terminal illness, what would happen to Dongyu? At noon, Dongyu returned home from school. I was still hiding in the bathroom, clutching my stomach and sobbing. When I heard his footsteps, I stood up helplessly and opened the door. He was about to look for me when he saw me suddenly appear at the bathroom door. He was shocked. When he saw that my eyes were red and my face was wet with tears, he looked even more puzzled. What's wrong? Brother! I clutched my stomach in pain and groaned a few times. Although I couldn't see my face, it must have been extremely pale and distorted because I saw that Dongyu was at a loss. What's going on? When he came closer, he saw the blood dripping from my body. The color drained from his face. Hang in there, I'll send you to the hospital right away. He carried me in his arms and rushed downstairs. He didn't even have time to catch his breath as he ran to the side of the road and got into a taxi. He said to the driver, "Driver, go to the First People's Hospital now." The driver was scared out of his wits. He thought that I was about to die, so he stepped on the accelerator and sped toward the hospital. He even ran several red lights. When we arrived at the hospital, Dongyu couldn't even make it in time to register. He carried me into the emergency room and said nervously to the doctor, "Doctor, please save my sister. She lost a lot of blood," and kept crying out in pain to me. The doctor also walked over anxiously. Seeing my pale face, he furrowed his brows. Then, he saw that my pants were stained with blood. His expression became complicated. Chapter 31:12. How old are you? I said, 14 years old, in the second year of junior high school. Where does it hurt? My stomach hurts, I cried. Doctor, am I dying? I've lost a lot of blood. The doctor frowned and asked Dongyu to put me on the bed. After chasing Dongyu out, he sat down and said meaningfully, "Young lady, did your mother never tell you what menarche is?" The muscles on the doctor's face twitched violently again as he calmly explained. It turned out that this wasn't a terminal illness. It was a period that all girls would experience when they reached puberty. It was commonly known as Aunt Flo. Every month it would come on time. This was a necessary process for a girl to evolve into a woman. After saying that, the doctor smiled, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Terminal illness? Young lady, you've been watching too many television dramas, haven't you? I was so embarrassed that my face turned red and I was at a loss. However, my mother and I didn't talk much about this. She didn't tell me what kind of changes a girl's body would undergo when she reached puberty. My mother seemed very concerned about Dongyu, but she seemed a little cold to me. My father was a typical male chauvinist. He wasn't good with words, and he wouldn't show me much concern. So much so that when I opened the door and saw Dong-yu pacing back and forth, I didn't know what to say. This wasn't a terminal illness, but an ordinary menstrual period. On the way back, Dong-yu also looked embarrassed. He looked at me and then at the bag in my hand. Inside the bag were the Sophie sanitary pads he'd bought from the supermarket. The first pack of sanitary pads in my life was chosen for me by Dong-yu. I blushed as I followed behind him and watched him pick out the sanitary pads from the shelf. The shop assistant recommended Sophie, and he paid for a few packs without thinking. That night, when my mother came back and found out about this, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That was why she taught me about this. The reason my stomach hurt so much was probably because I ate a few popsicles without restraint the night before. During menstruation, one shouldn't touch anything cold. The first lesson taught me a harsh lesson. In the first semester of the second year of junior high school, just as I was preparing for the monthly exam, bad news came from my hometown. Grandma was seriously ill. The doctor issued a notice of critical illness and told my father that the old lady's time was up. After bringing Grandma home from the hospital, her last wish was to see me and Dong-yu one last time. I vaguely remember that it was a snowy night. It had rained the day before, and the cold air had frozen all the water on the road into ice. My father drove us all the way home at a speed of 60 miles per hour. I sat in the back seat, tears streaming down my face. Dong-yu put his arm around my shoulder, his expression grave. He was usually reserved, but when he found out that Grandma was seriously ill, he was worried. I saw that his eyes were red too. The family of 4 rushed back to their hometown. Dong-yu and I rushed to the sickbed. Grandma took one last look at us and finally smiled in relief. She finally let out the last breath that was stuck in her throat. Then she breathed her last. When she closed her eyes, that old hand that was like a withered tree was still holding my hand tightly. I couldn't accept the fact and broke down crying. Dong-yu also knelt heavily beside her. He lowered his head and wept. Chapter 31:13. A suffocating pain enveloped me. For the first time in my life, I realized that my heart could really hurt. It was a kind of pain that made one feel suffocated, helpless, and at a loss. On the night of Grandma's death, the family was busy with the funeral, while Dong-yu slept with me in the small room upstairs. I couldn't close my eyes for the entire night. Tears kept streaming down my face as I hugged Grandma's large fan and cried until the sky turned dark. I remember this big cattail leaf fan. When I was young, when the weather was hot, my grandmother would stay by my bedside and fan us tirelessly over and over again until we fell asleep. When I went upstairs, I saw it and my heart almost broke. Dong-yu hugged me, not knowing how to comfort me. Even he was in a heavy mood because of Grandma's death. As if affected by my emotions, he also shed tears. "Shachuan, don't cry, okay?" He comforted me gently and held me in his arms as if he was coaxing a child. I didn't know how to respond to him. Although I didn't make a sound, my tears never stopped. He probably felt his heart ache. He held my face and carefully pecked away the tears from the corners of my eyes. Because of this kiss, I was shocked. My heart, which had been calm and unremarkable, suddenly raced. In the darkness, Dong-yu didn't seem to notice anything strange about me, but he also sensed that I was no longer crying. He also knew that this kind of comfort seemed to be able to calm my emotions for a short time. He held my face and gently kissed away my tears, just like he did when we were young. When I was young, I was especially fond of crying. This was how Dong-yu comforted me. Little did he know that when he grew up, such actions added to the ambiguity between a man and a woman. My heart was beating faster, but I was willing to be comforted by him like this. Subconsciously, I wrapped my arms around his waist. When I hugged him just now, he seemed to have woken up. He looked up slightly and met my eyes. I couldn't see the expression on his face, and he couldn't see the emotions in my eyes. He only smiled softly and said, "Little fool, don't cry. Grandma is gone, and I'll be with you. Can you stay with me forever? I promised Grandma to take good care of you." This wasn't the kind of care I wanted. This blockhead of his didn't seem to understand what I was talking about. Later, I realized that perhaps Dong-yu had already understood at that time. However, he deliberately avoided it and didn't respond. Just like when I was young, I stubbornly pursued the answer. But Dong-yu had long known that some things, once they were clarified, they weren't the outcome he wanted to see. Some things would be less painful if they were vague, and one would not have to face a cruel choice. He built a utopian world, hoping that these two feelings could coexist. That night, he held me in his arms and stayed with me the whole night until I calmed down. After the funeral, in order to thank the relatives who had helped at the funeral, Dad booked a private room in the hotel and treated them to a meal. On such occasions, Dong-yu was always the center of attention. Chapter 31:14. Mom. The girl sitting at the side blushed and looked around shyly. Finally, her gaze landed on Dong-yu. She pouted, but her eyes couldn't hide her adoration. Actually, such a joke couldn't be more normal. However, I didn't like it very much, so much so that I didn't look happy the entire time. I was uneasy to realize that Dong-yu and I were not destined to be bound together. Just as he said back then, maintaining this relationship would remain the same for the rest of our lives. And a third party was bound to barge in between us. The thought of this third party unscrupulously occupying his arms, his chest, his love, and that he wouldn't only have eyes for me. His care and protection wouldn't only be limited to me, made me fall into an unprecedented panic. What made me even more uneasy was that I was actually extremely repulsed by this possibility. I even felt a deep hatred for this third party who had yet to appear. I knew that it was ridiculous for me to think this way. Dong-yu and I were destined to be impossible. This forbidden love had an ending from the very beginning. It was destined to never be fulfilled. However, I still harbored a pitiful and humble hope, trying to find a way to break through this wall. However, every time I saw my parents' faces, I couldn't suppress the guilt in my heart. I thought that I must be hopeless. Even so, I couldn't escape this torture. Hence, for a long time I fell into this vicious cycle. I was haunted day and night and couldn't get out of it no matter what. I thought that I had been ill for a long time and couldn't recover. Other than Dong-yu, no one could cure me. I had also tried to let others into my world, but I sadly realized that it was like my world was shackled. It was just that no one could break that shackle no matter how hard they tried. At the beginning of my life, Dong-yu was my only faith. Even though the world was barren, I only wanted him to be by my side. I realized that my feelings for him were getting harder and harder to suppress. When I was in my second year of secondary school, it happened to be the 50th anniversary of second high school. There was going to be a cultural performance, and the class was collecting performances. I was forced to sign up, probably because the music teacher knew that I could play the piano well, so he strongly recommended me to perform. I didn't know why, but I agreed. Because the teacher said that if I participated in the talent show, I would get extra credits. At that time, credits were also an important consideration. After signing up, I had another excuse to pester Dong-yu every night. He was a little surprised when he found out that I was participating in the school's talent show. Dong-yu had been learning to play the piano since he was young. As his sparring partner, I watched him from the side and would occasionally pester him to teach me how to play the piano. Although my technique wasn't that professional, Dong-yu said that this blockhead of mine had some talent in music. Whatever I do, I always have a bit of passion. When it comes to the piano, I don't know if it's because of my love for the piano or some other reason, but I actually persisted for a long time. That month, I practiced the guqin especially hard. Dong-yu chose a song for me. I wasn't particularly obsessed with etudes and elegant songs that were too artistic. Hence, I chose a nice but simple song, Lin Junjie's Jiangnan. Chapter 31:15. But with less than 2 weeks to go before the school's anniversary celebration, I started to feel nervous. I'd heard that the school's anniversary celebration would be held in the school's newly built arts hall. I had a deep impression of this hall. Occasionally, when I was on duty to clean up, I was amazed by the magnificent hall. The hall was large enough to accommodate thousands of people. It was said that during the school's anniversary celebration, the entire school's teachers and students would be present. I couldn't help but feel nervous. When I thought about the upcoming anniversary celebration, I would make mistakes when practicing the piano. A week before the school's anniversary celebration, in the middle of the night, I was awakened by Dong-yu's anxious voice. When I opened my eyes, I saw that he was fully dressed and squatting by the bed. Under the moonlight, his eyes were as beautiful and bright as obsidian. "What are you doing?" I rubbed my eyes and muttered, "It's so late and you're still awake? Let's go. I'll take you somewhere." "What place?" He flicked my head. "Don't ask so many questions. Hurry up and get dressed." His mysterious look made me nervous. I hurriedly put on my clothes. He took my hand and tiptoed out of the door. When we left home, the night was dark and there were no stars in the sky. He wheeled his bicycle and drove me all the way to Gao. When the car stopped at the entrance of Gao, I couldn't help but be surprised. I asked in surprise, "Why did you bring me here? Remember? I've mentioned to you before that there's a beautiful tripod piano in our school's music classroom." I was bewildered. Finally, I understood his intention. Didn't you want to play the grand piano? Usually, students aren't allowed to touch this piano unless there's a performance. It's inconvenient to have a teacher around during the day. I'll take you here to practice at night. As he spoke, he turned and asked, "Are you sleepy?" "No." I shook my head and asked worriedly, "But the school's music classroom usually locks the doors and windows." Dongyu couldn't help but smile smugly, revealing his snow-white teeth. "It's my turn to be on duty today." I was still puzzled and didn't react. He leaned close to my ear and whispered, "There's a window that I secretly left unlocked. Later, I'll climb through the window and open the door for you." I was instantly excited. This fellow was quite clever in his little tricks. But I was still a little worried. Is there no teacher on duty in the school? If they hear the sound of the zither, they'll definitely discover us, right? I've asked around. Usually, the teachers on duty who are in charge of patrolling the building have already returned to the dormitory to rest at this time. Only the security guards are guarding the door at this time. However, the security room and the music room are far apart, so they won't find out. As Dongyu spoke, he led me through the back door of the school. My eyesight is not very good at night and I have night blindness. Dongyu held my hand and we walked in the dark to the music building. I turned around and looked around. In the school, all the lights were turned off. I couldn't even see my fingers in front of me. The empty corridor and the dark doors and windows formed a sharp contrast with the lively scene during the day. I was a little afraid of the dark. I kept feeling that such an environment was too scary. I thought of something terrifying and couldn't help but shudder. I walked even closer to Dongyu. It was said that a person's imagination was the most terrifying thing. Chapter 31:16. I often read horror magazines on the streets. At this moment, when the contents of those ghost stories flooded my mind, I became even more nervous. He sensed my rapid breathing and couldn't help but smile. "Are you that afraid of the dark? Dongyu, do you believe that there are ghosts in this world?" As soon as I asked, I was frightened by my own imagination. A pale ghost face seemed to flash before my eyes. I was so scared that I didn't dare to mention this word again. Dongyu smiled. "If I told you that I believe in ghosts in this world, would you be even more afraid?" When I heard this, I almost screamed, "Don't scare me!" "You're clearly scaring yourself." As Dongyu said this, he rubbed my head. "All right, don't scare yourself. If there really is a ghost, I'll definitely leave you behind and run." I panicked even more and wanted to cry. "Let's not talk about this anymore." Stop. He was amused by me and didn't mention it again. We snuck into the music classroom floor. Dongyu approached the bed and carefully opened the window. He pulled open the curtains and peered inside. The moonlight shone into the music classroom, bright and beautiful. He looked around cautiously, his expression guarded. I leaned against his side warily and looked at the corner of the corridor without blinking. I had a feeling that something would suddenly appear in the next second. I curled up into a small ball and carefully tugged at his sleeve. "Brother, are you sure it's okay?" "Yes." The teacher on duty should have returned to the dormitory to rest. "There's no one in the music building," Dongyu said in a low voice. Then he shot me a look. "Wait for me outside the door, okay? I'll climb in and open the door for you." "No." I grabbed his sleeve tightly. "Are you going to leave me outside alone?" "I didn't expect you to be so timid." "Why? Are you afraid that something will suddenly appear and eat you?" "Ah!" I screamed in fright. Dongyu quickly covered my lips nervously and pressed his finger against them. "Idiot! Are you trying to lure the security guards here?" "Who asked you to scare me?" Dongyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't be afraid, okay? Wait for me for a while. I'll be quick." "All right then." I compromised a little and nodded obediently. "Be careful." Dongyu held onto the edge of the window and leaped onto the windowsill. He nimbly flipped into the classroom. I walked to the door anxiously. I was so nervous that my heart raced. Soon, the classroom door opened from the inside. I squeezed through the gap and saw his bright smile. My heart gradually calmed down. Dongyu closed the door and turned around. I hugged his shoulders excitedly and cheered, "Big brother is the best." Shoo. He was afraid that I would make too much noise, so he flicked my forehead with his finger. "Lower your voice." "Ouch, it hurts." I covered my forehead and glared at him coquettishly. He exchanged glances with me. Then, he moved to close all the curtains in the music room and turned on a light. The warm light shone on a beautiful and elegant Yamaha tripod piano. Wow! What a beautiful piano! Chapter 31:17. I covered my mouth and sighed in admiration. I circled the piano several times in amazement. This piano fulfilled all my romantic fantasies about music as a young girl. When Dongyu was practicing the zither from a young age, I liked to sit by his side and watch him play the boring music over and over again in a daze. However, I didn't find it boring to practice with him. I liked his hands on the piano keys the most. His fingers were long and slender, and his fingertips were like porcelain. Against the black and white keys, they were extremely beautiful. Every afternoon, the sunlight outside the window would shine in and reflect on his handsome side profile. Against the light, it was quiet and beautiful. I wasn't born with a love for the piano. My obsession with the piano stemmed more from my infatuation with him. He looked at me circling the piano with his hands in his trouser pockets helplessly. I looked up at him and saw a warm and doting smile on his lips. "Brother, how much does this piano cost?" It was probably because I was touching the piano's frame devoutly like a believer praying. The longing expression on my face was too amusing. He chuckled and then frowned seriously. "It's very expensive." I was getting more and more curious. "How expensive is it?" Dongyu thought for a moment and said, "About 200,000 yuan." I was completely stunned. 200,000 yuan? It was an astronomical figure. He saw my eyes widen like copper bells and my expression of disbelief. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "This piano is a Yamaha. It's specially made for performance. The sound must be great. When is the school anniversary performance scheduled?" "In a week." Dongyu frowned. "Time is tight. Are you familiar with the tune?" "I've learned it, but there are some parts where I still need to consolidate the fingering. I was just an amateur at playing the piano. I hadn't practiced since I was a child. When I was young, when Dongyu played the piano, I would sit next to him and practice with him. I liked it the most when he taught me step by step. His gentle eyes made me indulge in it." "Where is the problem with the fingering?" Dongyu sat on the piano stool and patted it. "Come here and sit next to me." "Okay." I walked over and sat down. He said, "Play it for me first." "All right." I lowered my head and played seriously. From time to time, he would ask me to stop. He would lower his head and adjust my hand to the correct technique. But unknowingly, my mind was no longer on the piano. Instead, I kept staring at the side of his face, lost in thought. I couldn't help but recall that I had once asked Han Xiao how it felt to like someone. She replied that her heart was beating like thunder when she met him, and her heart was filled with joy. When he touched her, his breathing became hot and he fidgeted. That was liking her. I know I like him out of control. Especially when looking at him so calmly, it was as if 10,000 years had passed, and time had stopped. He looked up. Halfway through his sentence, he saw me staring at the side of his face. He was stunned. "What's wrong?" "No, nothing." I retracted my gaze in embarrassment, feeling a little guilty. Dongyu smiled. "Okay, let's continue then." Chapter 31:18. He used so much force that even his expression froze. He could clearly feel my trembling fingertips and was shocked beyond words. His palms were also covered in cold sweat and his knuckles were white. I hesitated again and again. Suddenly, I stared straight at him and mustered up my courage to plead, "Brother, let's always be together, okay?" Dongyu was stunned and a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. His eyes met mine briefly and he quickly looked away. He lowered his head and did not say a word. When I saw his silence, it was as if a thorn had pierced my heart. I felt a little suffocated. "Brother." I hate it when you're with other girls. I've imagined you dating other girls, hugging, dating, kissing. I can't accept it. It's like the end of the world. Let's be together forever and neither of us will leave. Just like we promised when we were young, let's be together, okay? 100 years, a lifetime together. My tone was humble and pleading. I was flustered and helpless. I was hoping that he would gently pull me into his arms like he did when we were young and promise me, okay, we'll be together forever. But he didn't. He only reached out his other hand with a trembling hand and pried my fingers apart one by one. When he looked up at me, his face was pale and helpless. Be good, stop fooling around, okay? I'm not fooling around. I'm obviously very serious. Can't you tell? Can't you tell? I approached him seriously and said anxiously, I want to be with you forever, brother. Didn't we agree? Shachuan, we're siblings. One day, I'll have a girl I love. She'll become my wife and spend the rest of my life with me. The one who'll be with me forever. Is that girl, not you. Do you understand? I don't understand. My face instantly burned as I questioned him. Why? Why can't I? When I heard these words coming out of his mouth, it was extremely cruel. My heart ached like a piercing needle and I couldn't see clearly. I clenched my fists tightly. Despair seemed to drown me. I asked, then what did you promise me in the past? Was it a lie? We made a promise. He turned his face away with a complicated expression, lowered his head, and stared straight at the black and white piano keys. He pretended to be calm and said, I promised you that I would be with you for the rest of my life and never leave you, but not in this way. Do you understand? The air suddenly became deathly silent. I saw him frowning. His face was dark and gloomy as if he was trying to avoid me. While I was unconscious, I couldn't help but reach out and clasp his wrist tightly. He turned his head in surprise, but I couldn't control myself and moved closer to him. I held his shoulder and kissed him clumsily. When she was young, she loved to watch those romantic and sweet idol dramas. Every time it was the kissing segment, she would watch the scene of the male and female lead kissing on the TV screen and her heart would beat faster. I followed what I saw on TV and held his face. I gently closed my eyes and traced his thin lips with my lips. Chapter 31:19. There was an inexplicable fragrance on his body. It wasn't the smell of perfume, but the light fragrance of laundry detergent. The moment my lips touched his, my mind went blank. All I knew was that I hugged his shoulders fiercely and deepened the kiss, longing for the warmth of his lips. I had thought that he would struggle and resist, and then push me away forcefully to break this out-of-control situation. But he didn't. I saw him open his eyes in a daze. Many complicated emotions flashed across his face. Then, he closed his eyes subconsciously, his shoulders trembling. I was even more nervous. My eyelashes fluttered, and the corners of my eyes felt sour, as if tears were falling. Perhaps he could sense my despair, but he couldn't help but reach out and try to hug me. I yearned for him. What about him? Did he yearn for me as well? But in the next second, he was stunned and pushed me away forcefully. Caught off guard, my body tilted and I fell onto the piano. His elbow pressed hard against the black and white keys, producing an extremely discordant chord. It was ear-piercing and heavy. I looked up and saw him suddenly turn around. Under the moonlight, his face was a little pale, and he felt ridiculous and shocked. I had never seen him like this before. I stood up awkwardly and helplessly. The corners of my lips twitched and I said with trembling lips, Brother, why did you push me away? He wiped his lips with a blank gaze. There was still the residual warmth of my first kiss there. Dongyu turned around abruptly and questioned me. Ridiculous. Shachuan, do you know what you're doing? How is it ridiculous? How is it ridiculous? My throat tightened. I got up from the piano stool and walked behind him. I reached out and carefully tugged at the corner of his shirt, as if I had done something wrong when we were young and guiltily begged for his forgiveness. Brother, can't I kiss you? You can't. Dongyu shook off my hand uncontrollably and walked to the window. He said in a low voice, I can't either. Why not? I couldn't help but cry. I said aggrievedly, I like you and you like me. Isn't that enough? I shouted the last sentence with all my might, almost breaking my voice. He suddenly turned around and walked up to me. He held my shoulders tightly. His eyes were bloodshot as he said crazily, "You are my sister and I am your brother. Don't you understand?" "It's impossible. Do you really not understand?" "Why?" I didn't understand and continued to ask. "I can't do without you. The same blood flows in our bodies. We're brother and sister. If we really get together, it'll be like asterisk asterisk asterisk. Do you understand?" He stared at me as if trying to wake me up. I suddenly laughed, feeling sad. I extended my hand and held his wrist. I placed my hand over his wrist and questioned him. "Is this the reason?" I stared at him with teary eyes and said humbly, "If that's the reason, then I'll cut it open with a knife and let all the blood in my body flow out." "Will that do?" "Shut up." Dongyu turned pale with fright and covered my lips tightly. "You're threatening me, aren't you?" I saw the unconcealed heartache on his face and broke down completely. I threw myself into his arms and cried helplessly. How would I dare to threaten him? Chapter 31:20. "But I don't want you to be with another girl. My heart will ache, my heart will ache. Brother, I just like you. There's nothing I can do about it. Wouldn't it be great if I could control it? But there's no way to control liking you." His body stiffened as if he had suddenly run out of energy. His arms fell weakly to his sides. He looked up, wanting to hug me, but he didn't dare to touch me. When I saw his helpless expression, my heart ached. Tears slid into the corners of my lips, bitter and astringent. "When I was young, I was so glad that you were my brother. I had the best brother in the world. But now, I don't want you to be my brother at all. Don't cry, okay?" Dongyu held my face and gently wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. Even he didn't notice the heartache in his eyes. When he saw that I was crying, his eyes turned red as well. He had never been good at expressing emotions. Regardless of whether he was happy or sad, he always had a calm and composed expression. He wanted to hug me, but he didn't dare to reach out to touch me. He wanted to hold my hand, but he couldn't muster the courage. He once said that no matter what we faced, we had to have courage and press forward. But when I hugged him like a moth to a flame and said that I liked him, he couldn't muster up the courage to hug me back. Perhaps he understood, better than I did, that some courage was ultimately futile. If you wanted the moon in the sky, you wouldn't necessarily be able to pluck it with courage. Hence, some things were destined to be unattainable. Some love was destined to have no ending. That night, when I returned home, I sat on the back seat of the bicycle. However, instead of wrapping my arms around his waist like before, I gently tugged at the corner of his shirt. The evening breeze was getting stronger, making it difficult for me to open my eyes. I repeatedly thought about what Dongyu had said to me, but I didn't want to take a single word of it to heart. In those few days, Dongyu seemed to have become a little indifferent to me. He had never been so cold to me since I was young. Even when he came to pick me up after school, he was no longer as close to me as he used to be. He also stopped practicing the zither with me. Towards the end, there was a complicated chapter in the middle of Jiangnan that I couldn't master. I had no choice but to ask the teacher to change the song list. I changed it to a song that I was more confident in, Autumn Whisper. I was in a bad mood and didn't know what I had done wrong. Unknowingly, in my apprehension, the school's anniversary soon arrived. The night before, I was so nervous that I tossed and turned in bed. I couldn't sleep. I was looking forward to the school's anniversary celebration, but I was also nervous. The school anniversary was on the weekend. On this day, Second High School was open to the public. Even students from other schools could enter and visit the school. Su Chi said that he would get a bunch of brothers to support me. I was amused when I heard that and asked if Dongyu was coming. He said that Dongyu was not coming because he had something to do. When I heard that, my mood turned gloomy again. So many days had passed, yet he was still avoiding me. Could it be that he was prepared to avoid me for the rest of his life? I was a little afraid that the distance between me and Dongyu would gradually drift apart. But I really didn't know that in this world, he was the only person closest to me in my life. I can lose the world, but I can't lose him. Even if it was the same as before, it would be fine. Chapter 31:21. The students participating in the talent show had to go to the auditorium in advance to get used to the scene. The teachers would pay close attention to how to go on stage, how to introduce themselves, and even how to smile in front of the camera. Only then did I realize that there would be a video recording of the entire event. This made me even more nervous. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood in the magnificent auditorium and saw that the students had slowly entered. The art teacher had put on some light makeup for me. To go on stage, I wore the prettiest dress in my closet. As the opening song, I was in charge of taking the lead. Just as the performance was about to begin, I heard someone calling my name. When I turned around, I saw Su-Chi waving at me from the first row. I immediately saw the person standing beside him, looking at me silently. When Dong-yu saw me, he suddenly stood up and stared at me nervously with anticipation in his eyes. Our eyes met briefly. Before I could say anything, the art teacher hurriedly pulled me over and said, "Shachuan, they're announcing. It'll be your turn soon." I nodded and hurried to the back of the stage. It wasn't until the host called my name that I finally reacted. The teacher was hurrying me and using the last few seconds to remind me. The most he said was nothing more than to tell me not to be nervous and to relax. When I walked onto the stage, it was pitch black below. Clap, clap. The stage lights fell at my feet. At that moment, I was surrounded by a blazing white light. The whole world was barren. I tensed up and hugged the microphone helplessly. I looked around but couldn't see anything. Finally, at the front of the stage I saw him. His figure was against the light and I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it had to be him. "Hello, everyone. I'm Ian Shachuan from Year 2 Class 1. Faye. I'm very honored to be on this stage. Next, I guessed that the art teacher who was standing behind the scenes and staring at the stage must be pounding his chest and stamping his feet in anger. Then he desperately lowered his voice and said, "Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous." But I couldn't hear or see anything. My heart was so nervous that it felt like it was about to jump out of my throat. I pressed my chest and finally, after calming down a little, I slowly said, "Hello everyone, I am Ian Shachuan from the first class of the second year. I am very honored to be able to step on this beautiful stage. Next, I will be singing a piano piece, Autumn Whisper." The audience applauded. I turned around and gently covered my rapidly beating chest. I slowly walked to the tripod piano. When I sat down, my fingers accidentally touched the piano keys. Along with the microphone, the wrong syllable played a discordant melody. I frowned and suddenly took a deep breath. Once again, I gently stroked the piano keys. I imagined Dong-yu sitting beside me. It was as if my nervous soul had finally been released. My 10 fingers formed a circle, and then, the syllables flowed from my fingertips like flowing water. Smooth, soothing, tactful. Relatively speaking, the technique of this song was more difficult than that of Jungnan. However, the advantage was that I had practiced this song for an entire year. After a little consolidation, I was so proficient that it was as if I had become one with the zither. Chapter 31:22. I immediately stood up. Below the stage, Dong-yu suddenly walked onto the stage. Amidst the applause and cheers, he pulled me tightly into his arms. At that time, I felt that even with so many people in the auditorium and the surging applause, it couldn't compare to the warmth of his hug. After the performance, I was about to pack my things and go back with Dong-yu. Dong-yu and Su-Chi were waiting for me at the school gate. I thought that perhaps this celebration would be the best time for me to reconcile with Dong-yu. Just as I reached the door, I saw Su-Chi waving at me. I walked over with a smile, only to see a few of my classmates walking towards me. When they saw me, they called out to me excitedly. "Shachuan, was that your boyfriend who hugged you on stage just now?" I was stunned. I followed their gazes and looked at Dong-yu, only to hear them whispering excitedly, "So handsome. Shachuan, what's your boyfriend's name?" Su-Chi heard their discussion and immediately walked over. He said unhappily, "You guys seem to have misunderstood something, right? His name is Ian Dong-yu. He's not Ian Shachuan's boyfriend. They're siblings, can't you tell?" Bah! I thought he was Ian Shachuan's boyfriend. So they're siblings. Ha! Shachuan, don't mind it. When Dong-yu heard this, he turned his face away expressionlessly. I didn't feel good when I heard this. I didn't know what Dong-yu was thinking. However, on the way home, Su-Chi was chatting and laughing, but he walked to the side without saying a word. Even when we got home, he didn't interact much with me. Instead, he returned to his room and locked the door. I stood outside his room in a daze for a long time before returning to my room in a daze. I originally hoped that as time passed, the tense relationship between us would be eased. However, time didn't bring about much change in our tense relationship. Instead, it brought about an unfamiliar girl. The first time I met that girl was on Dongyu's 16th birthday. That winter break, the weather was especially cold, so cold that it could freeze a person's heartbeat. At that time, people would usually book a table for their birthdays and invite a few good friends and classmates. After the meal, they would go to karaoke. Most of the time, their parents would be there on that day. They were more indulgent, so they could always go home very late. Dongyu's birthdays had always been celebrated at home because he didn't like too many people and lively environments. Dongyu said that he wanted to eat hot pot at home for his birthday. Early in the morning, I excitedly got out of bed and found the piggy bank on the desk. I smashed it and picked up the change one by one. There were even 2 10-kwai notes. I thought to myself that the pocket money I saved up for a year was finally going to be put to good use. When I was young, I always forgot to give Dongyu a present for his birthday. In my eyes, birthdays were meaningful as long as the family was together. However, after entering junior high school, the concept of birthday gifts gradually became clearer. After lunch, I took a bag of change and ran to the cake shop. I ordered a 10-inch birthday cake and repeatedly reminded them to write, "Happy birthday to Dongyu" on it. I wasn't in a hurry to leave the shop. I waited for the whole afternoon until the cake was ready. I counted the candles and took the cake home. Chapter 31:23. I had never seen this girl before. She was thin and tall, with a delicate face and a sweet smile. She was wearing a pure white dress. "Dongyu!" I ran over and hid the cake behind me. I walked up to him and asked curiously, "Who is she?" Dongyu glanced at me, his expression inexplicably uneasy. The girl glanced at me and introduced herself graciously. "You're Dongyu's sister, aren't you?" "Yes, I am." "Hello." She smiled and extended her hand to me. "I'm Dongyu's girlfriend. I'm in the same grade as him." "Girlfriend?" I sized her up in shock. It was obvious that I didn't believe her one-sided story. I didn't respond immediately to her outstretched hand. Instead, I stared at her in a daze at a loss. "Linley, this is my sister. Her name is Xiaochuan." Dongyu introduced her and then said to me, "Xiaochuan, this is my girlfriend. Her name is Linley." "Your girlfriend?" I couldn't believe it, so much so that I looked a little embarrassed. Dongyu's expression turned uneasy when he saw my sorry state. Linley didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she smiled and said, "Am I not liked by her?" Dongyu smiled. "How can that be? She's just a little shy." Shy, that's right. I was indeed shy. Especially when it came to this girlfriend of mine, I was caught off guard. Perhaps sensing that the atmosphere was too tense, Dongyu hurriedly said to her, "Let's go upstairs first." Then he said to me, "Hurry up and go upstairs too. We have to prepare the hot pot. Mom and Dad won't be home tonight. You have to keep this a secret." He raised a finger to his lips and winked at me. I watched in a daze as he went upstairs and stood there motionless. I didn't know why I was so stubborn at that time, standing there foolishly for so long. Perhaps I was thinking that if Dongyu hadn't seen me go upstairs, would he have come down to look for me? He was so meticulous. Would he have been able to tell that I was unhappy? Would he have coaxed me gently like before and then told me that he was lying to me? I stood there foolishly and didn't go upstairs until Su-Chi arrived. He parked the car and found me standing there motionless. He walked over and patted me on the shoulder. "Why didn't you go upstairs?" At his reminder, I snapped back to reality. I looked up at the sky. Before I knew it, it was already dusk. I stood there foolishly for 2 hours. Seeing that I was still in a daze, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the cake in my hand, he quickly took it from my hand. Only then did I realize that my fingers were bleeding from the ribbon of the cake. "Let's go upstairs." As Su-Chi spoke, he reached for my hand. I quickly asked him, "Su-Chi, does Dongyu have a girlfriend?" Su-Chi did not look surprised. Instead, he asked matter-of-factly, "Don't you know?" I shook my head and asked him, "How long have you been talking?" "It's been about a month." "Oh," I replied. Only then did I realize why he had been coming home so late after school recently. I couldn't accept such a thing. Chapter 31-24. Suchi took my hand and led me upstairs. When we entered the house, Dongyu was in the kitchen, preparing the ingredients for the hot pot. Originally, I should have been very happy on my birthday. I was famous for my love of hot pot, especially the chicken soup base that Dongyu had concocted. It was delicious. However, standing in the kitchen, I saw that other than Dongyu, the girl was there as well. She stood beside Dongyu and helped him prepare the soup while she was in charge of the ingredients for the hot pot. The two of them were chatting and laughing in a harmonious manner. The kitchen was too small. With the two of us standing there was no room for a third person. However, the spot beside Dongyu that used to belong to me was now occupied by another girl. I felt a little suffocated. I placed the cake on the table with a numb expression. Just as I opened it, Linley walked out of the kitchen. When she saw me at the table, she quickly walked over and placed the cake on the sideboard. It's not time to eat the cake yet. The hot pot is almost ready. With that, she busied herself with her work. I looked at her, not knowing what to think. My mind was blank, and many images flashed through my mind. Dongyu had said that sooner or later, he would fall in love with a girl, get to know her, fall in love with her, and spend the rest of his life with her. That person couldn't possibly be me. Then, could she be that girl? So, this was nothing. Ever since the last argument with him in the music room, our relationship had suddenly become a little stiff. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding me. No matter what I said to him, his attitude became much more indifferent than before. He was neither cold nor warm. He must be angry. I wanted to make him happy and try to break the tension between us. I originally thought that this birthday would definitely be able to ease the cold relationship between us a little. But I didn't expect such an accident to happen. Dongyu brought out the hot pot. After the four of us sat down, Suchi looked around and asked curiously, "Is it just the four of us?" "Yes." Dongyu nodded. "I don't like too many people." "I know you. You don't like noisy environments. It's good that the four of us are here. It's not bad to have a quiet birthday." Suchi clapped his hands. "Then let's dig in." Linley stood up and poured drinks for us. I sat in my seat with a numb expression. I didn't know what to think as I watched Linley put the ingredients into the pot and take them out one after another. She was a girl who knew how to take care of people. She took the initiative to pick up the ingredients for Dongyu. Seeing that I didn't move my chopsticks, she picked up a piece of beef for me and asked with a smile, "Why aren't you eating?" "Oh." I quickly picked up my chopsticks and looked at the hot pot. The steam blew into my eyes, and I couldn't see clearly. "It's so hot." I rubbed my eyes, blinked, and forced a smile. Dongyu suddenly looked up at me. However, he quickly turned around and smiled at Linley. I didn't know what he was saying. I found that my ears were suddenly not working properly. I could not hear what he was saying. The hot pot was quickly scooped clean. Suchi clutched her stomach and slumped into a chair, crying out, "I'm full." I quickly said, "I haven't eaten the cake yet." Linley also said, "I'm full too. What to do? I can't eat any more." Suchi said, "At least blow out the candles and make a wish." Chapter 31-25. There's no need to blow out the candles. In any case, a wish won't come true. Linley's expression froze. But people always ask for candles to make wishes on their birthdays. Dongyu said, "My family's tradition is to eat longevity noodles." I see. I suddenly stood up and brought the cake to the table. Then, I arranged the 16 candles in order. I didn't know what I was obsessed with. I lit the candles one by one with a lighter and said to Dongyu, "Dongyu, make a wish? Although your wish might not come true, perhaps it will come true one day?" Dongyu looked up and finally looked me in the eye. After a moment of silence, he smiled and said, "My wish will never come true." My smile froze. Suchi couldn't help but be curious. "What kind of wish is it that even you say, will never come true?" "Let me guess." Linley thought for a moment. "Get into a good university?" Suchi said, "With Dongyu's grades, it won't be difficult for him to get into a top-notch university. Is there a need to make a wish?" Linley guessed again. "Find a decent job in the future." Suchi said, "If he goes to a good university, will he still have to worry about a job?" Linley, don't make wild guesses. Dongyu is always unfathomable. Who knows what he's thinking all day long? I suddenly walked to the switch and turned off the lights. In the dining room, there was only the flickering light of the candles. Against Dongyu's face, his deep-set features looked inexplicably downcast. Suchi also said, "Hurry up and make a wish. Whether it comes true or not, you have to have a wish. Close your eyes. You must be sincere." Only then did Dongyu close his eyes. 5 seconds later, he blew out the candles with a whoosh. Suchi walked over and turned on the lights. He looked down and saw me standing there in a daze. He was stunned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I regained my spirits and quickly said, "Let's cut the cake." Dongyu suddenly stood up. "I'm not eating anymore. Lin Li and I are going to the Lantern Festival in the park. Are you guys coming?" I realized that the Lantern Festival was approaching. There would be a Lantern Festival in the park. It would be beautiful. I'd always wanted to go with Dongyu. The night view would be beautiful. But my gaze fell on Lin Li with a complicated expression. Suchi did not think much of it. Lantern Festival? What's so interesting about the Lantern Festival? Today is your birthday. Let's go sing. I also said, "Yeah, I want to sing." Lin Li said, "I want to go to the Lantern Festival." This opportunity was hard to come by. Normally, there wouldn't be such an opportunity. It was only available during the Lantern Festival. "Suchi, Shachuan, let's go." I said, "I don't want to go to the Lantern Fair. I don't want to see them walking hand in hand at the Lantern Fair." Usually, when I was this stubborn, Dongyu would be the first to compromise and take care of my emotions. However, that night he did not do so. Instead, he said, "Suchi, accompany her to sing. Lin Li and I are going to the Lantern Festival. We have an appointment." He then said to Lin Li, "Let's wash the dishes before we go." Lin Li nodded, and the two of them carried the bowls and chopsticks into the kitchen, chatting and laughing as they began to wash the dishes. I suddenly realized that Dongyu's rare smile was no longer mine. When he looked at me, he no longer had that doting smile. Chapter 31:26. I sat in the dining room and silently watched the two of them wash the dishes in the kitchen. I suddenly remembered that when I was young, I was punished by my mother to do chores. In the kitchen, I would stand on a stool and wash the dishes alone. Dongyu would run over and join me. Originally, I hated washing dishes. It was so dry and boring. But because of him, I enjoyed the time of washing dishes. Once when we were fooling around, he accidentally made foam all over my face, and I accidentally ate more than half of it. The soap frothed in the water, and when it entered my mouth, it was bitter and astringent. Because of this bitterness, my face wrinkled. Dongyu went downstairs and used his remaining pocket money to buy a bottle of Coke. He urged me to drink it. I was forced to drink the whole can of Coke. At the last moment he asked nervously, "How is it? Is it still bitter?" I stared at him for a long time before I suddenly opened my mouth and let out a loud burp. He was scared out of his wits, but when he saw me giggle foolishly, he leaned forward and sniffed in all seriousness. It smells like detergent." I was so angry that I chased after him. "It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, would I have eaten the foam?" He avoided me and teased me. "Who asked you to be so stupid? Little fool. Little fool. Don't call me little fool again. Little fool." The images gradually overlapped. I snapped out of my thoughts and saw that Dongyu and Lin Li had already set the table. They walked out, picked up their coats, and were about to leave. I asked cautiously behind him, "Are you really not going to eat the cake?" Dongyu didn't turn around. He only said lightly, "I told you I don't like cake." With that, he took Lin Li's hand and left. The door closed with a bang, leaving Suchi and me standing there. My eyes reddened with grievance. I walked up to the table and looked at the cake. On it was written, "Happy birthday to Dongyu." Now that I thought about it, it was somewhat ironic. "This cake is very expensive." I burst into tears. I saved up a year's worth of pocket money to buy this cake. Why did he say that he doesn't like cake? Is it because the cake is not good? When Suchi saw that I was crying, he immediately panicked. He walked over and quickly comforted me. "Why are you crying? Just ignore him. He doesn't like it, but I do." Then, he pulled me to sit down and divided the cake. Then, he picked up a fork and started eating. Delicious. As he spoke, he looked at me. My hand that was holding the cake didn't move at all. My tears were dripping onto the cake. He didn't know what to do, so he came over and hugged my shoulders. Do you know that I'm most afraid of you crying? Whenever you cry, I'm always at a loss. Tell me, what should I do with you? He squatted in front of me and coaxed me. What do I have to do to stop you from crying? Suchi. My mouth trembled and my voice was as light as a feather. Take me to sing. Suchi was stunned, but nodded without hesitation. At that time, karaoke was a very trendy thing to do. For those of us who were studying at the time, karaoke rooms were very expensive. Just a private room alone cost more than 200 yuan. Some of the better ones cost more than 500 yuan. Chapter 31:27. It was also because of Suchi that I stepped into a karaoke room for the first time in my life. On Dongyu's birthday night, it was the second time. Compared to the nervousness of the first time, sitting in the karaoke room with Suchi, I actually felt like an old man. I ordered a lot of songs, most of which were popular at the time. At that time, Jay Cho and Lin Junjie's songs were popular. I ordered I Still Miss Her, and held the microphone as I sang. Tears drown me, who should be sad, who let go of this relationship. I finally understand promises that can't be kept become shackles. Happiness is always in short supply in reality. Please tell her, I don't love her. Smiling sadly, I punish myself, want to stop all this struggle, harden my heart, tell a heartfelt lie, don't tell her, I still miss her. Hate is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. This song existed in Dongyu's MP3 player for a long time. At that time, I didn't understand why he liked this song. When I first heard it, the melody was nice and the lyrics were sad and beautiful. I was addicted to it and collected many of Lin Junjie's songs. I also became Lin Junjie's fan. However, after listening to so many songs, this was the only one I liked. I never got tired of listening to it. I don't love, I don't hurt, I don't understand, my heart has long been hollowed out, but my words are insincere. Please tell her, I don't love her. Smiling sadly, I punish myself, want to stop all this struggle, harden my heart, tell a heartfelt lie, don't tell her, I still miss her. Hate is easier to let go than love. When tears clog my chest, just let silence replace all the answers. After singing this song, I suddenly felt that every word in the lyrics was almost heart-wrenching. I felt a sharp pain in my heart. I picked up a can of beer, pulled the tab, and took a big gulp. Suchi looked at me silently. Perhaps he could tell that something was wrong with my mood today, but he couldn't understand my sadness. For a moment, he just sat silently beside me and put his arm around my shoulder. Ignore them, I said to him. Let's sing our song. Suchi said, Shachuan, what's wrong? You drank so much, are you okay? What's this bit of wine? As I spoke, I took another sip. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He pressed his hand against mine to stop me. Stop drinking. Are you here to sing or to drink? You ordered so many drinks. Isn't it a waste if you don't drink them? You don't have to finish everything you ordered. I put my arms around his shoulders without any explanation. At that moment, my head started to feel groggy because of the alcohol. I leaned very close to him. Leaning close to his face, I smiled and said, Sing with me, okay? My breath reeked of alcohol. Okay. I heard that you sing very well. Sing a song for me. Suchi smiled and walked to the music machine. He chose a song. Perhaps he guessed that I liked Lin Junjie's songs, so he chose, I Really Want to Love Her. It's raining. He's holding an umbrella beside you. But I wasn't happy. Because the smile on his face was very forced. I really want to love her. But the eyes lie, it's easier to keep it a secret. Lest our feelings become complicated. I really want to love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit? Who can give me a good answer? If I can't bear to, if this goes on, we're all victims. I really want to love her. But the eyes lie. It's easier to hide. Lest our feelings become responsible. I really want to love her. But reason quarrels. Is it possible to quit?